Are dating apps creating incels?
Conversation around truly the future.
This is to discuss fix this million. So let's
Given
with this graph. It shows that young women are now out earning young men.
It is true. We have given women so many tools to achieve, but now boys are being left behind.
Take it away.
And the number of males aged 16 to 24 who are not in education or employment has increased by a staggering 40%.
Yeah.
And the data I've seen is that when the woman in the relationship starts making more money, they become twice as likely to get divorced.
Because traditionally women seek partners who have more economic or social status than they do. And emotional intelligence is the new currency in dating. But these guys were raised not to be emotionally intelligent, but to be a provider.
Stealing my talking points.
That a lack of male involvement in kids' lives is a big factor leading to this. And once they lose a male role model, they become much more likely to engage in criminal activity.
And so we are just creating a lot of these angry young single men who are saying, well, this is rigged against me.
We actually asked some of our audience to write in, and this guy, Jeffrey, wrote in and said, my entire life, I've never felt like I was good enough. Like I could never earn my place in society.
It's devastating. But something that's controversial I've gotten pushback on. I think the secret weapon for men that they don't leverage is to...
I want to hear a woman's perspective on it.
Honestly, what I would do is...
Oof. Dramatic cut.
This has always blown my mind a little bit. 53% of you that listen to the show regularly
subscribe.
haven't yet subscribed to the show. So could I ask you for a favor before we start? If you like the show and you like what we do here and you want to support us, the free, simple way that you can do just that is by hitting the subscribe button. And my commitment to you is if you do that, then I'll do everything in my power.
Wait, hold on, real quick. If you don't like any content that I watch, please fucking leave for a little bit. Or for all the retards that share, like, why are we on red pill? Why are we on red pill? Why are we on red pill? This is the largest gap in voter gender that we've seen in like US history between young men and young women. If you don't like watching a particular thing, then just leave. Don't just shut your brain off and turn into a fucking retard. This is arguably one of the most important issues facing the Democratic electorate right now. Holy shit, you're actually fucking retarded. Oh my God. Now we're watching the whole fucking video and then I'm going to sleep afterwards. Jesus.
Be on my team to make sure that this show is better for you every single week. We'll listen to your feedback. We'll find the guests that you want me to speak to and we'll continue to do what we do.
And it's fucking Scott Galloway. What is this red pill? Jesus.
Much. Lost Boys. In March 2025, the Centre of Social Justice released this report which has sent a couple of shockwaves across the UK, especially across the media. And just to give you a little bit of a sort of preface and some context on what this report says, at the start of the report, Andy Cook, who's the CEO of the report, says...
Andy Cook.
We listen to those working on the front line, the teachers, the youth workers, the charities, and the parents who day in, day out see the struggles of young people. And in recent years, they've been telling us the same thing. Something is going on with our boys. And because of this, they wrote this report called The Lost Boys, which looks at all of the different facets of why young men are struggling. And in this report, they say boys are struggling in education. They're more likely to take their own lives. They're finding it more difficult to find stable work. And far too often they're caught in crime. The numbers don't lie. Something has shifted and we cannot ignore it any longer. It's not just about Andrew Tate or online influencers. These are symptoms, not the cause. The deeper truth is that too many boys are growing up without the guidance, discipline, and purpose they need to survive. And there's some frankly horrific graphs, which actually sent the CEO of my company, a lady called Georgie, into quite an emotional state. She texted me and told me she was crying looking at some of these graphs, which we'll talk about today.
Weak.
But this is a subject that I know both of you know very, very well. So I'm keen to get into exactly why this is happening and what we can do about it. But to preface this discussion, to understand where you both come from and the perspective you have, Logan, who are you?
Yeah.
And what do you do?
I'm a behavioral scientist turned dating coach. So that means that I take all the lessons from the field of behavioral science, how we make decisions, and then I apply them to the field of relationship science, which is how love works. And so I'm really passionate about this topic because for a long time, I've found that wherever I go, people say, oh, I know all these great single women. Do you know any great single guys? And I just thought, oh, okay, maybe that's always been happening. But when I actually dug into the data, I saw that we are truly in a dating crisis right now. And there is a huge mating gap between the type of men that women are looking for and the type of men that are available. This is a critical conversation around truly the future of humanity because marriage rates are down, that means birth rates are down. And so this conversation is extremely important.
And what sort of reference points do you draw upon? Because you've got some sort of unique access to data, right?
Right. So I work at Hinge for the last 5 years. And so I have access to tons of data there around how daters are dating now, how daters are dating differently, what sets successful daters apart. And then I also have conducted my own research for this conversation.
Choose with the
So
enemy.
I sent out a survey to thousands of my newsletter subscribers, and people were very excited to talk about this. And I've conducted a lot of new research that I'll be sharing for the first time on this topic.
So I make my living looking at data and trying to come up with insights. I spend most of my career looking at data to try and add shareholder value. And then I have the luxury now of focusing on things I'm really interested in. And I just sort of stumbled upon data that reflects that the cohort that is ascended fastest globally is women. And this is a wonderful thing and a huge.
Destiny, sounds like women just need to lower their standards of me. True. The big one issue that you run into, I don't know if we'll talk about on this, so is that women seem to be a little bit more comfortable being alone and single than men are. So
Huge collective victory. And the group that has fallen furthest fastest is men in Western markets. And the data was just so overwhelming. And also, I was close to being one of these men. I didn't have a lot of economic or romantic prospects when I was a young man, but there were programs and an environment where I could be successful. And I worry that some of the temptations, the technology, the economic trends, had they been where they are now then, I could have very easily ended up a statistic. So I just sort of relate to these.
I understand the point of like saying that, but it is funny when people are like, you don't want to be just another statistic. Well, I mean, technically you're always a statistic no matter what, right?
Problems.
I'm keen to understand from your perspectives what you think like the first domino that falls in a young.
Is that not due to women having more options than males? Women don't have more options than males. There's one person for one person. It's like about a 50-50 split in society. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that like at the end of the day, we're about 50-50. It's not like it's 10% women in society and 90% men.
Young man's life or a young boy's life that causes the outcomes we're talking about today. Like where is the first place to start?
So the research I've looked at, and Richard Reeves from the American Institute of Boys and Men has done good research here, the point of failure, if you reverse engineered issues to, is when a boy loses a male role model. And that is, in the US, we have the second most single family parent homes behind Sweden. And what's interesting is that in single parent homes, girls actually have similar outcomes, similar rates of high school attendance, income, rates of self-harm. Boys, once they lose a male role model, become much more likely to be incarcerated, engage in criminal activity, harm themselves. It ends up that while being physically stronger, boys are emotionally and mentally much weaker. So the loss of a male role model is, I would argue, kind of the first point of failure that predicts that a boy is going to struggle. And that has impacts on family court, economic policy, and just general zeitgeist in our society where men need to step up. If we want better men, we need to be better men. We need to step into that void.
Another one that Richard Reeves talks about is that there's not enough men in the education system.
100%.
So I believe when Tim Waltz was a teacher, 1 out of 3 teachers in his school was a man, but now it's like 24%.
Yeah.
And so where do kids spend most of their time? In school, and who's teaching?
I feel like gendered teachers, I think, are kind of important. I feel like I took this for granted a little bit, but thinking back, because I went to a Catholic private school, thank God. Thank God, literally. LOL. There's just a different feeling of like talking to an older man versus talking to an older woman, I guess. Like, I don't know if other people feel the same way, but there's always something that feels a bit maternalistic or condescending more from like an older woman to a young man, but having an older man talking to a younger man can feel more. It's still, I guess, paternalistic maybe, but it's not condescending. It just feels different. I don't know how to explain it. It just feels different.
Teaching them, mostly not men.
And you think, well, women can be fantastic teachers, and it's
Right.
true. But after school programs, not as many coaches that typically are male, not as much compensation, so they don't get rewarded for being coaches. And if you just think about it logically, who does a teacher champion? A teacher champions someone that reminds them of themselves when they were a kid. So, and also just look at there's incredible bias, I would argue, against males in school. A boy is twice as likely to be suspended on a behavior-adjusted basis, twice as likely to be suspended for the exact same infraction is a girl. 5 times as likely if it's a black boy. And once you're suspended twice, it probably means you're not going to college. In addition, look at the behaviors we promote in school. Sit still, be a pleaser, be organized, raise your hand. You basically just described a girl. And also, quite frankly, a lot of the jobs that require tertiary education attainment, there's more women now in law school and medical school, and quite frankly, good for them. They're just better at that. They're better students. They deserve to make more money. They deserve it. But the reality is,
I do think it's very interesting how quickly the biological versus environmental arguments shifted once men started to fall behind in school. Because prior to the push to get women more involved in school, the thought was that women just kind of, I think, just didn't have the brain for it. They just weren't smart like men were. They couldn't handle it. And now that argument has turned completely in the other direction to where it's like, actually, women are more designed for school than men are. And it's actually bullshit that they can do things like sit still and chill or whatever more than men can.
it has huge ramifications when we no longer have wood, auto, or metal shop. They've gone away.
Right.
So those used to be a path to decent middle-class jobs. They've been replaced by computer science. So what are the paths for the 2/3 of males that aren't going to end up with a traditional liberal arts college degree?
Right, and just to add a few more stats to that, so we know that 70% of valedictorians in the US are female, and women are much more likely to be in the top 10% of their class. But then on the SAT, men and women...
Do you think the inverse is true, that women are? I mean, it seems to be right now that the temperament of a woman, like just gender-wise, tends to be somebody who can just be a little bit more calm and chill and sit down and just hang out, versus men might, for our bodies, maybe it's a testosterone thing or whatever reason, seem to demand a bit more physical activity. I don't know if that's always the case or it's just what it looks like right now because of the social training that we get, but...
or young men and women earn the same scores. So there's definitely something happening in schools that is prioritizing the female experience, or that women are better at that. We definitely want to celebrate the success of women. I think the changes that have happened over the last 50 years are incredible, and I feel like
There's also, because of the biological differences between us, there are different things. Sometimes the same behavior can be treated in different ways, you know? Like, there are no, like big dogs typically don't misbehave, and small dogs can behave like crazy because if a small dog bites somebody, it's not a big deal. There aren't very many men in society that lose their shit and start beating the shit out of people. Those men typically aren't in society because they get removed from society and put in jail. If you're a woman that's prone to stuff like that, maybe at some point your shit gets fucked or whatever, but if you're a guy that's prone to stuff like that, you're either gonna get killed or you're gonna get arrested and locked up, you know, so...
I'm a beneficiary of that, and so is my daughter. If you look at all of the books that my daughter was given when she was born, they're about great women in history, you can be anything, dream big, little one. And so I feel like we have given women so many tools to achieve, and in many ways those have been manifested, but now boys are being left behind. And so this isn't a zero-sum game. I was nervous about coming on here because I thought people would say, she's a male apologist, she doesn't see how much women are still struggling. I think everyone is struggling. I think life is hard. Yeah. But what's happening right now is we need to have empathy for young men, and we need to bring them up.
Men were hunters and women were gatherers. School is just gathering knowledge, so it's unfair from the ground up. I don't believe that, like most anthropologists think that anymore. I think that it's just generally seen that everybody kind of did all sorts of jobs back in the day, back in the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. I don't think they were ultra-gendered. Don't believe. But I would have to look at, I have to go dig through that to know for sure. Chill.
Because this isn't just a problem about young men, and patriarchy doesn't just hurt women. A lot of people think about the patriarchy as something that prizes men and hurts women. But when there's a very narrow definition of men, everyone is hurt by that. And that's all the research that I've done, is over and over seeing women feel like they are not enough good men to date, and men feel like they're being held to a ridiculous standard of holding both sides of the coin, being feminine and masculine.
It turns out, as you were speaking, I was looking at the stats around fatherless homes, and it turns out that there has been a significant increase in the amount of young boys being raised without a father present. About 25% live without a biological step or adoptive father, according to the National Fatherhood Initiative. In the US has the world's highest rate of children living in a single-parent household, and 92% of the time that's with the mother alone. And in 1968, only 11% of children lived with only their mother, compared to 21% in 2020, so that's doubled. in the last 50 odd years, which is pretty staggering. And then obviously the consequence of that, as Scott described, is that individuals from father absent homes were 300% more likely to carry drugs, to carry guns, to deal drugs, and there's this huge plethora of mental health consequences if you don't have a father in the home. I mean, what do we do about that? And like, where are the fathers?
Yeah.
Where are the role? Where are they going?
Well, it's complicated. There's male abandonment. There's just no getting around it. But also going back to family courts, sometimes the courts in the our economy make it difficult for a man to stay involved in the kids' lives. And also, family courts getting better at saying, all right, the kids, I mean, just a personal anecdote. I have a friend who recently has gone through divorce, 2 daughters, very much wants to be involved in their lives. They're 13 and 15-year-old girls, and quite frankly, dad's there on the weekends, and they got their own thing going on. And they don't necessarily make dad a priority. And dad's not around for what I call the garbage time. And that is what I found with my boys.
Always blame
is the
children.
Moments of serendipity and connection happen randomly when you're taking them to school, when you're out in the back, jumping around or playing whatever it is, these garbage moments. And when you're not in the household, for whatever reason, there isn't that much garbage time. And I think slowly but surely they lose sometimes connection with their kid. There's something weird going on. I'm curious, Logan, if you've got data on this, but you have a 1-year-old daughter, right? You're going to be amazed when my 14-year-old boy had a Halloween party. And the boys are like cute, but they're dopes. They're boys. There's some 14-year-old girls who look like they could be the junior senator from Pennsylvania. They're 5'10". They're articulate. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Galloway. How are you? What a lovely home. And the boys are like, I don't know. And biologically, girls mature faster. Their prefrontal cortex is 18 months ahead of a boy's. An 18-year-old girl or woman.
And physically as well, I think. That's why there's that weird period in is it like 2nd or 3rd or 4th grade where the girls are all like taller than the boys for like a year?
Is competing against a 16-and-a-half-year-old when she's competing against an 18-year-old. And they're even finding that it's getting worse, that women or girls are starting to menstruate earlier and boys' testicles are descending later. So the gap in maturity, biological gap, they think might even be growing, and they don't know if it's pesticides. But when I meet my 8th graders' colleagues, there's a huge difference between between the boys and the girls.
Yeah.
And one of Richard's suggestions is that we redshirt boys, that we hold them a year back. The boys start kindergarten at 6, whereas girls start at 5.
So the research in the UK shows that 70% of girls are ready to start school at age 5, but many fewer boys are capable of starting at that age in terms of readiness. And so if you were to hold boys back, then they might be on more equal playing field for those critical moments of 4 to 5, of 13 to 14, where the brains really develop at a different stage.
I want to talk about that sort of early education experience and how it can be adapted, but also just like if the environment of the classroom is right for boys. As we were talking about the point about fatherlessness as well, I found this graph, which is also pretty shocking. And it goes into something you said, Scott. It basically shows that the absence of a father on a boy causes depressive symptoms, but the absence of a father on a...
This red one is male no father absence. This light red one is male early father absence, female no father absence, and female early father absence.
Young girl doesn't cause the same depressive symptoms, which means that the absence of a father for a boy drastically increases their chance of being depressed, whereas if for a girl it doesn't.
There's a lot of...
Wait, am I crazy? Depressive symptoms. Female father, no absence. Am I just retarded? It looks like as you get older, if you have, oh wait, you would have to compare this against the control of just what the ordinary symptoms are, or how often do people have depressive symptoms, I guess. This graph doesn't show what he's saying, right? Yeah, I think.
Of symptoms,
okay.
But the absence of a father on a young girl doesn't cause the same depressive symptoms, which means that
How is school set up appropriately for boys convo any less stupid than the black kids need to run around to learn math thing? Because regardless of what people think or however people feel politically, men and women do have very real differences when it comes to our biological makeups that can come out socially in some ways, and those have to be accounted for. My understanding is, to this point, there's not really strong like racial differences that have to be accounted for in some genetic manner, that like black people or Ethiopians or whatever have these hugely different, even if there are on the aggregate some ancestral differences or whatever, it's not even anywhere near remotely as different as men and women can be. Maybe one thing missing is that women can be fuel for men to achieve. Now that women don't need men and serious relationships are later in life, less men have access to a young woman to push them. If that's what your life has been, that's never a good thing, but okay, maybe, I don't know.
The absence of a father for a boy drastically increases their chance of being depressed, whereas if for a girl it doesn't.
There's a lot of other graphs that look like that in terms of women and young girls are just actually a lot more resilient in childhood. So if you are in foster care as a young woman, you have less negative outcomes than young men. And so there's this theory in parenting of, is your child an orchid or a dandelion? And so the orchid really needs very particular situations to grow. They need a certain amount of light. They need to be watered in a particular way, and they'll thrive in some situations, and they will not thrive in others. Whereas a dandelion can really survive in many situations. And so women, young girls, tend to be more dandelions in childhood. And so that's why when you have a boy and a girl both in negative situations, the boy is more negatively impacted.
Boys are just weaker. There's a crazy stat I read that two 15-year-olds, a boy and a girl, both sexually molested. And to be clear, they're equally heinous crimes. But the boy who's sexually molested is 6 to 10 times more likely to kill himself later in life. It ends up that boys are just less resilient.
Do you think there's somehow more of a stigma there? Like, I wonder why that's
Shame,
so
they
dramatic.
can't talk about it, get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This is probably true, but the lack of resiliency is probably not a biologically hard-coded thing. It's just how much emotional training we give to young men versus women is like non-existent for men for whatever reason.
There's a lack. I mean, I think just until a few years ago, the social incentives were to never speak about it.
Right.
I was on Lewis Howe's podcast, and he just openly said, I was sexually abused as a child. And it was so shocking for me
Wow.
to hear this big, handsome guy.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have said it 10 or 20 years ago. I think people would have assumed that it was his fault. It made him less of a man. So I think a lot of that has hopefully gotten better, but we just have to acknowledge boys mentally and emotionally are weaker than girls.
Lewis House didn't admit that until a couple of years
Could you
ago.
describe what emotional training looks like? I think it's just being asked to account for the feelings of people around you and then being asked to modify your behavior to account for the feelings of people around you. I think that I think socially women are just more from an early age kind of like trained in this manner versus boys are just kind of like get to goof off and don't have to think about it as much, generally speaking, I think.
Is that right?
So he's lived with that his whole life. And
Wow.
it wasn't until he was, I think, having dysfunction in relationships and a few other things had happened that he decided he wanted to say it publicly for the first time, which again feeds into your point. We actually asked some of our audience to write in, and one of the people that wrote in was a teacher in a primary/preschool. And she said to me, she was an anonymous teacher in Germany. And she says, every year it seems like more and more children, always boys, have this new energy to destroy the classroom dynamics. These boys almost always have two things in common: a lack of boundaries at home and unsupervised, unlimited access to all kinds of content on the internet, e.g. porn. Their perception of what is okay and what is right becomes completely distorted. I have tried so many things, and every year it's becoming an even bigger challenge.
Paste. Disruptor. We're the disruptors. The disruptor class.
Young boys in school. So one proposal is to delay education for boys, put them in education later. Is the classroom itself a problem? Like the sitting in school, listening to someone speak at you. Someone proposed to me on this podcast before that boys need more sort of practical play, and the classroom isn't designed for that. I wasn't sure if that was...
Well, in single-sex boys' school, they end up with double the amount of recess time. And that is
Wait, I don't know. Are there single sex elementary schools? Is that a thing? I guess there might be. I've never heard of that in my life though. I don't think we had recess in high school. I don't remember having recess in high school, but
Single sex boys school, they end up with double the amount of recess time. And that is I equate boys to dogs. A happy dog is a tired dog. And if it's not tired, if it doesn't get to run, it's going to cause trouble. And I feel the same way about boys. So in these schools where they decide what's best for the boys, there's usually more exercise and more free play and more roughhousing, co-ed schools. And you're also seeing, I think with boys, I mean, by even acknowledging that men play a critical role in boys' lives a few years ago, that was seen as sexist. What, you mean, what, you're saying moms can't do this? And I can just tell you there are certain moments when my partner needs me to weigh in. I don't know if it's the depth of my voice, my physical size, the way they relate to me, the fact that I'm not, you need dad. Or that's what I have found, especially with boys. They need almost like that not physical intimidation, but it's almost like they begin tuning out their mom over time. I mean, they're incredibly close to their mother. They look to her for nurturing. When they really have a problem, I find they go to mom. But they will constantly test the boundaries, constantly. And I think a lot of single mothers, quite frankly.
I feel like part of this, and I can't speak to his arrangement, and obviously I only have one kid and a long distance now, so it's different. But I wonder for this thing, one style of parenting that a lot of parents engage in that I super hate, and I feel like you shouldn't do this, is to have like good parent, bad parent, where you go to mom if you kind of want nice things, and then you go to dad for the discipline. And now I don't know if he set his household up like that, but when you have that style of parenting, then I think that's also going to play in a lot more to like the kid's not listening, bring in dad because he's like the serious guy. I don't know. I feel like that's a really unhealthy way of parenting, but it's super standard. I think a lot of people still do it. So,
But boys just can't keep a lid on that kid. They can't control the kid. So, and I think you're finding at schools when there's no male kind of, I don't know, involvement or that I don't know, what I'll call physical presence. And then you add on this dopa machine that they get used to squeezing a dopa bag 100 times a day as they need it. And then you take the dopa bag away, they're just more prone to emotional outbursts.
Doesn't ending gender roles means women with good jobs have to ask out men who make less and view them as viable? We can't all have good jobs. A job is only good if it's relative to other people. Yeah, maybe, but I mean, like I've seen different, I've seen competing explanations for what's happening there in that I haven't actually seen competing explanations. I'm just trying not to sound like a fucking one-sider. But I think that one of the big problems seems to be that when women out-earn men, and maybe there's been more research on this, so maybe people have updated this, but when women out-earn men, the women are also still doing like the majority of the work in the household, and the women are still doing the majority of like the emotional labor in the relationship. So you'll get this inversion of gender roles where the woman is now earning more money than the man, but the man isn't taking on more emotional responsibility of the relationship or isn't taking on more household stuff. So the woman just ends up doing everything. And then in that case, that's an easy hotbed for fostering resentment. Like nothing will make you hate your partner more than feeling like you have to do everything in a house.
I'm curious if you've done any research around why that is.
And there could also be resentment on the man's side, where a man might feel resentment, depending on his view of gender roles or whatever else, where he might feel resentment if he feels like his partner's out-earning him.
That emotional outburst more common among boys than girls.
I haven't done that research, but I am imagining that there's moms out there that are raising boys on their own, and they might be like, yes, it is hard, but what do I do?
Right.
And so for that boy who isn't taught by a lot of guys in school and isn't in the Boy Scouts, which doesn't exist anymore, or it doesn't have...
Is the Boy Scouts, are they being hyperbolic, or does the Boy Scouts just not exist anymore? Is that true?
Big brothers, big sisters, like what does that mom do?
So, but that you brought up Boy Scouts in America.
It's called the Scouts
Scouts
now.
for America,
Right.
and it can be boys and girls.
Right.
But Girl Scouts have their own single
Yeah.
sex, but Boy Scouts aren't allowed to have their own
Right.
single sex. So,
Is that true? That's kind of retarded if that's the case. It's not boys only anymore. I feel like there's nothing wrong with having like a joint scouts thing, but I feel like boys and girls should also still have their own like you can have a scout, like you can have like scouts where everybody goes to scouts, but then like boys can have their thing and then girls can have their things, like a boys only scouting outing or whatever the fuck. I guess I have no idea how it's set up now.
The question is, all right, what do you do? And I think that we need a societal zeitgeist that says immediately, if there's no longer a male involved, we have to get other men involved and acknowledge that that's not being sexist, that's important, that you get men involved. And I think, so I came from a single parent household, raised in...
I was in Boy Scouts, and it was basically an incel factory. Having women would definitely been an improvement for many kids in my experience. I feel like at that age, you're already in school with girls, though, right? You shouldn't need girls in Scouts as well, no?
By a single immigrant mother who lived and died as secretary, light of my life. As soon as my dad was gone, and then he had to move away for work, she got other men involved in my life. And I had wonderful men involved in my life. I had a stockbroker. Neighbor down the hall came in with his girlfriend and said, "Do you want to go horseback riding? You take me horseback riding." I don't know if men would be comfortable doing that in today's age. So getting men involved in their lives, after school programs, Boy Scouts. I had a lot of wonderful men. I used to go camping, and there were men everywhere involved in my life. And I worry that a lot of those institutions, and also there's a reticence and a hesitance.
They never spent time with them at school. If you don't have a sister or something, you just never really get much experience. Not to come down on anybody, but like if you're in a co-ed school and you don't spend any time with the girls in your co-ed school, what makes you think you're going to spend any time with the girls in a co-ed scouting environment? It seems like you're probably just never going to spend any time with any girls, period. No, that would be my assumption.
For men to get involved in a boy's life that isn't theirs, for fear they're going to be perceived as something's wrong with them.
I was thinking that. So if we have less men in the home raising the children, and then we go to school, and the stat says that 72% of teachers in middle school are women as well. There's no men at school either. It's no wonder that boys are struggling so severely at such a young, early age for so many reasons, because one would assume that they're being socialized in the same way as girls.
What's the downside with mixed gender scouts? There's not a downside to that. There's an upside to having gender segregated areas. There's an upside to, nobody likes to talk about it, and because this language was used by wokies, now like everybody on the right is fucking allergic to it and cannot process it with their brain. But there's something to be said for like safe spaces. Like it's nice to be in an area where you can shut your brain off a little bit. Oh my God, I can just never, we live fundamentally different lives. I can never communicate with you. Like it's just impossible to tell you what it felt like going to an all-boys high school. In retrospect, I'm so glad I went to an all-boys high school. The idea that when I'm at school and it's just all guys and we're there to learn or do whatever, and then after school is girl stuff, having like that gender segregation there for certain events is just so nice. It is so nice. It's just a thing you don't have to think about. Having that environment, so whether that's in a scouting environment or whatever, where it's just like boys or just girls, I think there's value to that. So there's nothing wrong with having a mixed environment, but if you're getting rid of all of the gender segregated environments, there's probably something being lost there,
I'm seeing, I've got a mother at home, don't have a father. I've got women at school, don't have male teachers. I mean, that's a controversial thing to say. I'm sure it used to be, but I think people are waking up a little bit now.
We need more male teachers. There's more female fighter pilots per capita than male kindergarten teachers. There's an absence. There are some boys, not some, there are millions of boys in America whose first male role model is a prison guard. Yeah. And there are just no men in their lives. After school programs being canceled, no women, very, very few men, K through 12. Dad's not around. There are literally communities, you read articles about it, where it's like, where are the men?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Where are they?
Online.
Doesn't look like they're in work.
On 4chan.
They're not in college.
The reality is there just aren't, for a lot of reasons, a host of reasons, a lack of male involvement in kids' lives is a big, big factor leading to this. There are other factors. There's socioeconomic factors. There's biological factors. There's a lack of vocational training. There's outsourcing of many of the jobs that made a man's path to the middle class viable. I mean, you want to talk about the UK, a big problem is the lack of growth.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of income opportunities for a young man who's not exceptional. And what we've seen in the US is essentially, if you look at our economic policies in college, it's never been better to be remarkable. Like if you're in the top 10% of your high school class, you're going to make more money than the top 10% did 10, 20, 30. If you end up at Google, you're going to make, a kid at Google who's amazing, computer science degree, can make millions of dollars by the time they're 30. But I can prove to every one of us mathematically that 99% of our children are not in the top 1%. And our economic policies have basically said that school and college is meant to identify a super class of 1%ers that we're going to try and turn into billionaires, instead of figuring out the infrastructure and the programs to ensure the bottom 90 have a shot of being in the top 10. And one of the stats is just around college acceptance. When I applied to UCLA, the acceptance rate was 76%. Now it's 9%. I was unremarkable for whatever reason.
I wonder how much, or how many more people that are applying to college now too, right? I don't know if that would impact that at all.
Prefrontal cortex, single mother, whatever you want to call it. But back then they had the mission and the charge to let in unremarkable kids. And that's no longer the case because America's superpowers are optimism. And we all believe our kids in that top 1%. And the reality is they're not. Or people think, I like an economy where you can make $1 billion because that's going to be me one day. So they have ignored the fact that we are crowding more and more prosperity and opportunity into the remarkable. And for me, it comes down to what do we want in America and the UK? Do we want a superclass of billionaires, or do we want a society and an operating system that gives unremarkable people a shot of being in the top 10%? It's become winner take all. And we have purposely created a set of economic and educational policies that crowd a massive amount of prosperity into the top 1%. And we have opted for it because we believe we have a shot at being in that top 1%.
I love that because I think the winner takes all applies to a lot of different things. So I bet the top 10% of Americans now are healthier than they've ever been, while the rest of the country
100%.
has never been healthy.
Best healthcare in the world if you're in the top 10%.
Yeah. Or in marriages, the top marriages today are the best marriages of all time, yet we have declining marriage rates. So we're nearing the lowest rate of marriage that we've ever had in American history. So most people or fewer people are getting married, but if you're, 2 college graduates who get married in your 30s, you might have an even stronger bond than people in the past. But that is a small group at the top.
Marriage has become a luxury item.
Yeah.
If you're in the top quintile of income earning households, you're 75% get married. If you're in the bottom quintile, only 25. If you're in the lower quintile of income earning men, only 1 in 4 chance of getting married.
And this has huge impact on our society because we know that married people are healthier, they're wealthier, they live longer. When couples are married, they actually have lower rates of child poverty. And so this has huge implications for our society if we're having fewer marriages, especially when you think about having fewer babies.
I want to get into dating and marriage and love and all those things. One of the things that really shocked me as I was preparing for this conversation was this graph, because this isn't the narrative that we hear. Can you both see this one? This is
Right now, the pay gap between men and women is disguised by older people and certain racial demographics. And when you break apart a lot of these cohorts, you start running into some pretty scary shit. So I think that across all ages, I think black women are already out earning black men. And I think the trend in other racial demographics is for women to start dramatically out earning men in all cohorts, but it's still just young people that we see this in. And for older people, it hasn't stratified in that way yet. The difference here, though, because it's scary, because to adjust for income, that's not a thing that you can change very quickly. That's a thing that requires a whole bunch of investment in like education, training, social stuff. And so if this starts to run too far in one direction, the correction is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very lagged. And it's still probably socially like hard to talk about. Like, I think if you were to suggest at any school or to like any admin, like, hey, we need some like affirmative action stuff for men now, you're going to like, it's over. Like, people on the left are going to look at you like you're crazy. People on the right don't even believe in affirmative anything. So now you're fucked, This
is the reverse gender gap.
Oh, yeah.
Gender pay gap graph.
Right.
And it shows that young women are now out earning young men. That's not what I heard. In terms of like, if I log onto social media, we've been trying to fight the gender pay gap, but to see that young men are now falling behind, both in education, both in unemployment. Young men face higher unemployment, nearly twice the rate of women. looking at the early developmental stats, this graph was horrifying. I actually couldn't believe that was true, that young boys are struggling so much in education, but then to see also that it's reflected in.
So that graph shows that boys age 16 to 24 are making 10% less in full-time employment than women. And so it is true that we're seeing a reverse income graph. But what we do need to talk about is even when women make more in their 20s, that changes around age 30.
And they have kids.
Well, maybe, but also be careful because looking at what women earn in their 20s and looking at what women earn in their 30s doesn't necessarily mean that when the women in their 20s become the women in their 30s, they're going to be earning what the women in their 30s are earning now, right? Because we could be seeing like lagged effects of increased education and access to certain types of employment markets by women that the women in their 20s have that women in their 30s didn't. Although what she's saying is probably true to some extent, that like women that have kids or whatever have to leave the job market and everything too, but
when they have kids,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's like this meteorite hits
Yeah.
and there's this huge burden placed on women. And I think that's a big part of the conversation that we'll talk about when we talk about dating is women still feel like they have to have, do all the household chores and raise the kids, but suddenly they have to earn a full-time income too.
100%.
And so many of the gender roles are changing. And so, yes, that graph is true. We have seen since 2020 that there's a shift, but I don't want to just say, oh, women are making more in perpetuity, because as soon as there's kids involved, they pay the price.
Do you know you said that women feel the need to then also earn a career and all those things? Where did that come from?
Well, there's this idea of hypergamy. So traditionally, women seek partners who have more economic or social status than they do. And for most of human history, this worked because men had the resources. And so there was sort of this arrangement where women could often marry someone who is more educated or earned more. But over the last 50
I don't understand what she means when she says that. I don't know if this is just a random talking point she doesn't like it too much, because people generally always marry within their own cohorts. Hypergamy as being practiced in history, this is just not a real thing. Like peasants married peasants, aristocrats married aristocrats, like women from the farm village, didn't suddenly marry into royalty or marry into some like upper class family. But yeah, I mean, generally women are marrying, I guess, more for economic opportunity, but that's because every man is higher than every woman because the men were the ones that worked, right?
years, that's really changed. And so what I'm seeing in my work, working one-on-one with women, is that when they say that there aren't enough good guys to go around, that's actually true. So we now have this huge mating gap where we have these high-performing, high-earning women that have done the work and gone to therapy and work out, and they're ready for their great partner, but they're not able to find enough guys who are available. And if this is a problem now with the women I work with in their 30s, we are going to be facing a much more severe crisis 10, 15 years from now. So currently 60% of college enrollment is women, but soon it's going to be for every 2 women that graduate, it'll be 1 man. So that means half of those women will not have a guy who graduated from college. And so this is a crisis because these women are saying, okay, if you cannot be the provider, then you need to be offering more. Emotional.
Oh, this is one of the things I talk about a lot, is that like one of the things that I think young men have the biggest issue with is, why would you date a woman if you're a guy? The value proposition is immediately obvious. Like, men like women, they're fun to be around. They offer something that is like markedly different than what you find in other men. Like, it's not really men don't typically think about that. Like, why would I want to date a woman? What do you mean? It's a woman. Obviously, I want to date a woman. The value proposition is not there by default for whatever reason for women. And I don't think men ever spend any time thinking about, like, what does a woman get out of dating me? They also kind of assume that it should just be the same on their end. Like, well, hey, don't you want to date a guy? Like, why would you not want to be with a guy? No? It's an issue that some people have.
Intelligence is the new currency.
Or not. That's not an issue some people have. That's a big issue, I think, in dating markets right now. And then because the left is fucking retarded when it comes to talking about dating or anything, all of this territory is completely ceded to fucking red pillars that will never give you good dating advice on anything. But
then you need to be offering more. Emotional intelligence is the new currency in dating. But these guys were raised not to be emotionally intelligent, not to give emotional support, but to be a provider. And so they've been chasing this lion. I'm going to hunt for this lion of being a provider. But suddenly they're told you need to hunt for a tiger, which is emotional intelligence. They don't have the skills to do that. And so women have raised the bar in terms of what they need from men, while men are continuously falling behind.
Yeah, There's a lot there. There's some nuance around the pay thing. So the data I've seen is that women under the age of 30 in urban areas are now making more money. But to your point, the moment they have kids, where corporate America has really failed is it hasn't figured out a way to maintain a woman's professional trajectory once she decides to deploy her ovaries and have kids. And there's some data saying, okay, 2/3 of divorce can be reverse engineered to the man starting to make less money. When the woman in the relationship starts making more money, they become twice as likely to get divorced, 3 times as likely to use ED drugs because the guy loses a sense of purpose and self-esteem. What gets lost in that data is the reality is if a woman is stepping up and stepping into the economic void and being more economically.
Oh, he's going to say that the man has to also be able to step into the other position. But there's a lot of honor in a woman. Like for women, like it sounds cool to be the earner and to step into that position. But for men, even though red pillars and everybody else and all the tradcon guys will lie to you and say, oh, no, there's a lot of honor in being a woman and being feminine too. That's bullshit because men hate stepping into that fucking role. They fucking hate it.
Being a greater economic contributor, then logically it would make sense that men need to step up logistically. And I think what a lot of women are saying is like, okay, I'm not getting anything. You're no longer a provider. And by the way, you haven't filled that void. You haven't made up the delta. Mm-hmm. So there's some nuance around it. What also I think is important to say is that if women are better students and showing the discipline and the skills to go to college in an information economy and making more money, then okay, good on them.
It's not hate. I just say that they have almost no interest in any of that stuff. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that your comment is not super revealing of something that you should tease apart in your own free time, okay? But what somebody might say that it would be interesting for you to say, like, wow, what about like housework and like cleaning the dishes and cleaning clothes? And it's like, well, men just don't have the biological interest for doing housework like women do. Like, spoiler alert, women don't like doing it either. I mean, no.
Just as for whatever reason men made more money, maybe it wasn't fair, but it's not a crime against humanity if women have the skills to make more money. What happens though is the second order effects that you're talking about, and that is, and we don't like to talk about this, 75% of women say that economic viability is hugely important in a mate. Only 25% of men. For men, it's not a criteria. For women, it is. And Chris Williamson of the Modern Wisdom podcast, he has this great stat, or he calls it the high heels effect. And that is 50% of women say they won't date a man shorter than them. I'm curious what you think, but I think it's more like 80%. I think it's an embarrassing thing to say because just instinctively, women feel like they'll be vulnerable during gestation and they want someone they think physically could protect them. I just think it's hardwired into them even if they don't know it. Women metaphorically are getting taller every year, and women made horizontally and up and men horizontally and down.
Right.
And when the pool of horizontal and up keeps shrinking, they just have, so this notion, a ton of great women, where are the men? Or there's no men? There's a lot of men, just not men they'd want to date.
Right.
And then you speedball it with the guys who are in the top 10% can engage in Porsche polygamy. They can get a date every goddamn night, which does not encourage long-term or very good behavior. So the guys they all want are not incented to enter into long-term relationships. And the bottom half of men are literally shut out of the mating market. And we always kind of, and this goes to your bailiwick, kind of portray men as the predators and the idiots and they just got their act together. There's something strange going on in that as online dating. When a woman can go out with a guy, a high status male, and I'll put forward this thesis and I want you to respond to it. She can have sex with him, which gives her the impression that's her weight class for a relationship, but he's not interested in a relationship. And then she basically decides the bottom 90 are no longer in her weight class. And you can't tell a woman to lower her expectations, but the reality is, and what the data I've seen on dating apps is that all of the women want the same few guys, and they shut out the rest.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things.
People do this, like the Chad guy fucking 10% or whatever, but even though this is like a fun pet theory that a lot of people like to put forth, and it seems like it's borne out in a first order way, like how women rate men's attractiveness or whatever, the stats just never back this up. Like the overwhelming amount of sex that happens, unless this has changed recently, happens in relationships. The overwhelming amount of women, like the average body count for like a fucking woman is like 5 or 6. Like this is just, I know that this gets said so much, and I feel like it's almost become a truism at this point, but there's never been strong research that supports any of this ever, or at least I've never seen any, unless this has changed recently and there's starting to finally be research that supports this. But this theory keeps being repeated, but there's just never any data to support it.
I'll respond to there. So one, going back to the income graph, I want to just call out that yes, right now in a few urban markets, women are making more than men. So women in DC and New York under 30 are making more than men on average, but in most situations, men are still making more than women, but we're talking about a projection. Going back to the dating research. So yes.
I like selection for casual relationships that women flock to the dudes at the top. I don't, most women, this is just an impossible thing because most people's engagements with women are like on fucking podcasts now. Most women don't want to be shared by some fucking high status dude or whatever. That's like a fantasy that different people in the podcasting world have sold you, but most women do not aspire to be like one of Chad's many fuck bitches. That's just not a thing. Like, it's just not. But now there are going to be some women that maybe that enjoy that, or there are going to be some that are in certain environments that like that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, most people, yeah, that's a very exceptional type of podcast influencer world type thing.
It's exactly as you described. What we have right now is there's fewer and fewer men that are hypergamous mates for women. So if there's a much smaller pool of guys, then what you have is you have a bunch of women competing for the same men, and then a bunch of guys get ignored. But what I also see is that those top guys are having a hard time deciding. So I feel like in my coaching practice as a dating coach, I'm working with a lot of women who say, what do I do? I've changed my profile the way you said I should. I took your class, but I still feel like there's just not enough great guys. And then I work with these CEO men who are having such a hard time choosing. And so I think we really have this exacerbated problem where so many women are competing for the same men, and then a bunch of guys are getting ignored. And then what ends up happening is, where do those guys go? And they go online. That's what you see. They go to porn, or they go to Reddit. I mean, I love Reddit, but they're really going to some of these red-pilled communities. And so what you're seeing now is just men really opting out of society. So when you go back to that stat, 1 in 7 young men in the UK is neat.
I think that one problem, and maybe I'll get to it too, because on dating apps, like would you even say game theory? Statistics wise, on apps, I think it's 5 men for every 1 woman. So if you're an average guy, you're already fucked. If your go-to for dating is like exclusively in the world of online dating apps, there's already been a massive error that's been committed, and shit is going to be fucked until you can figure out how to not make it so that the only way for men to meet women are on dating apps. That's just always going to be a loser of a conversation.
Not an employment, education, or training. They have just opted out. And as Scott says, there's nothing scarier than a single man.
What do I do other than the online apps? I have no fucking idea. Good luck.
A young single man. And so we are just creating a lot of these angry young single men who are saying, well, this is rigged against me. And so that's why I am worried about the rise of people like Andrew Tate. And if we wonder, where are the dads, where are the men? Well, men are finding these father figures, but they're finding them online, and they're not the father figures that I would choose for the majority of men. And so I'm really worried about this, because I feel like women are saying, guys, you need to step up because I can provide and I don't need that from you. And guys are not prepared to rise to the occasion.
What are women looking for? Scott talked about height.
Yeah. So I would say, I work at Hinge, but I do think that apps have perpetuated this issue around height, because if you can set your height filter to something, then you might set it higher. And then it's as if you have the dating app is a club, and you're literally having bouncers that prevent a bunch of guys from even getting into the club. So many women in the US set their height filters at 6 feet, but only...
Is this a Hinge thing? Are there height filters? I don't remember that on Tinder. Jesus. Damn. I feel like every guy then would just fucking lie, no?
14% of men in the US are 6 feet or taller. So what happens to the other 86% of...
Well, but also think about that. 14% of men are 6 feet or taller. But if you're on an app where there's 1 woman for every 5 men, you can get away with that, right? Like you can get away with that. Why the fuck am I not able to do this? You can get away with being that picky. Dating apps are it's a rough place to be at if that's your go-to for if that's like your starting point, I think for dating related stuff, it's just really rough.
Men and women are saying, where's my guy? It's like, well, he's not even showing up on your app. And so a huge thing that I push women to do is to change their height filters and just say, there is nothing that proves that you're going to have a successful long-term relationship if the guy is higher. I'm married to a short king. I love it. I feel like I really found this gem. And I think that so many women are missing out on great potential partners because of things like height.
Scott's point as well about they will date one of the men in the top 10%, sleep with him potentially, and then that kind of adjusts their standards and they expect all other men to meet that standard, but there isn't enough men to meet that standard, is there?
I haven't specifically heard that. I mean, there is a lot of evidence around assortive mating that people sort of have an internal sense of how attractive they are and that they end up with someone similar to that. But assortive mating is different than hypergamy, which is really this idea, as Scott said, that women tend to date horizontally and up, and men date horizontally and down. So if you have 2/3 of women who are college grads and
how are you measuring that? The only way I can think of to ever get a measurement of this is to look at an individual's earnings, because most men don't marry women from a lower class, right? But if you're saying one college-educated family of doctors and lawyers, like the guy there is going to marry a woman who's coming from who doesn't work, but is from another family of doctors and lawyers, and she got like a degree in arts or some bullshit. Like, that's not really marrying down. Like, that's not really hypergamy from the woman's perspective. Like, it's a rich family with a daughter marrying another rich family with a son. Like this, it's just I don't know. I'm curious how she's measuring that.
Third of college grads who are men, and some of them are going to date women without college degrees. You truly do have this dating crisis where there's just not enough men to meet this hypergamous mating.
Again, you can't tell women to lower their expectations, but this is the reality. When you ask a man if you could have a woman who had 80% of everything you wanted, 75% say, yeah, I'm on board. Mm-hmm. When you say to a woman, a man has 80% of what you want, 75% say that's not enough. But if you, but even look at...
What was the joke? Oh no. Is it Joe Budden? Was it this podcast?
Nah, watching his point being proven in real time was wild.
A lot about women. I think I learned exactly how the fall of man occurred in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and Adam said one day, wow, Eve, here we are at one with nature, at one with God. We'll never age, we'll never die. And all our dreams come true the instant that we have them. And Eve said, yeah, it's just not enough, is
it? No, that's not funny.
I was just waiting for more.
Well, that was kind of his point. Oh, God. That's kind of what he was saying.
Oh, no.
At the media.
Right.
What does the media tell a woman to do? He's out, but he didn't open your door. He's not nice to his parent. You'd walk right out on that man. Like, it's literally every piece of media is, you don't need him. You're a strong, independent woman. Pull the ripcord. You're out. And it is the basic kind of communication around this is, you are a strong, independent, powerful woman. That is wonderful. And quite frankly, you don't need the imperfect man. And they're just not connecting. I read that on Tinder, a man of average attractiveness has to swipe right 200 times to get one coffee, and then 4 of those 5 coffees will ghost him. They will decide they don't want to meet him, or they won't show up. That means a guy of average attractiveness has to swipe right 1,000 times to get one coffee. Now, what does that tell that guy? Women don't value me. Women make me feel rejected. And then they go online and they see these.
I will say, listen, don't be an incel and don't be a red pillar, because they're all incels, okay? But there's only one thing that will turn you into an incel faster than listening to a red pillar, and that's talking to a woman about dating apps, okay? Don't ever make that mistake, guys, all right? I've been there. I did that journey so that you wouldn't have to. Oh my fucking God. Why don't you message that guy more? Oh, I don't know. I'm waiting for him to message me. And it's like, he literally messaged you 2 times. You didn't respond. It's like, yeah, I know I was busy, but I think he'll message me again. It's like, okay, well, what about this guy? Why didn't you go out with him? And it's like, well, I don't really know if he likes me. And it's like, you guys have been talking on DMs for 3 weeks, like every day. What do you mean you don't know if he likes you? Well, I don't know. Maybe he's talking to other people. I mean, he might be. You're talking to other people, right? Yeah, I know. But like, why don't you just ask him for coffee if you want to? Well, I don't know. Like if I ask him and he says no, it's like really humiliating. And it's like, okay, well, don't you think he might feel the same way? It's like, oh, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, like if you really want, and it's like, bro, nothing will make you want to fucking kill yourself faster. Oh my God. Just kidding. In a video game.
Misogynist telling them it's not your fault. And these men become much more prone to misogynistic content, much more prone to nationalistic content, blaming other people for the lack of economic opportunity. They start sequestering from society. I worry that we are literally evolving a new species of asexual, asocial male. And if a man by the age of 30 hasn't either lived with someone or married someone, there's a 1 in 3 chance he's going to have a substance abuse problem.
Damn.
In addition, it goes so much deeper than that, because if they don't develop the skills, you know, the reason romantic comedies are 2 hours and not 15 minutes is this shit is hard. Like finding an attractive, intelligent woman, generally speaking, 75% of people who've been married longer than 30 years say, in the beginning, one was much more interested than the other. And it was almost always the man. Women are much choosier. The basis of evolution is seed trying to get everywhere, men, and women deploying a much finer filter to.
Okay, Scott has got some weird, like I know that these are common talking points, but none of these things have just ever been true. Like for human males, we don't just plant our seed everywhere. You have to be with one partner. You cannot run around and fuck everybody. Because of how human biology works, that's an unsuccessful mating strategy. You're less likely to pass on genetic material than people that pair off in serially monogamous relationships. I don't know if where he's gotten some of these talking points from, but whatever. But
to select the strongest, smartest, and fastest speed. So men need an environment to demonstrate excellence. And you hear these women talk about it. He was kind. He was good at work. I liked the way he smelled. He was funny. Where do men demonstrate excellence?
Coming from a guy of your height, do you get insecure when you meet taller women? No, not usually. And I feel like women that are taller than me, a woman who's like 5'9" or taller, generally doesn't, in my personal experience, doesn't seem to care much about shorter men, because a lot of the men they meet end up being shorter anyway, so they don't care as much. You have to be really careful with that. Would a woman date a shorter guy question? Because like most women are, no offense to women, I don't know what's the difference around. Most women are short. So yeah, the average woman is 5'4", 5'5". Most of those women probably wouldn't date a shorter guy. For, you know, whether that's acceptable or not acceptable, like most women, you know, most guys are taller than most women. Like it's kind of a, people like really freak out sometimes when they hear that stat or they see that stat or they talk about it or whatever. But
when they're not going to college, they're not going into an office because of remote work. Where do they have, they're not going to church, they're not going to temple. Where does a woman have the opportunity to fall in love, other than these baseline metrics? And you were talking about, women say, you've seen these TikToks, over $100,000, that's not unreasonable, and over 6 feet, that's 2.2% of the male population.
666,
so
baby.
Where do they fall in love? Where can a man demonstrate excellence? It used to be go to temple, 7 single women, 7 single men, and they kind of paired off and worked it out. And online dating, similar to online e-commerce, online rentals, it's created a winner-take most, if not all, environment. And it's basically been amazing for attractive guys, attractive wealthy guys, tall wealthy guys. It's been amazing for them. For all the other guys, it's been a disaster, and it's been made it mildly shittier for every woman. The digitization of mating, I believe, has been a disaster. It's been bad for women. It's been disastrous for men.
I want to talk about how the genders seem to be separating in a lot of important ways. We know from research around political affiliation that women are now, on average, 30% more liberal than men. So they are definitely experiencing political polarization. Then for the first time...
Yeah, I've actually heard this before, but I don't bother saying it because most of my audience are men anyway. Don't want to hear it. 5'9" female here. I find it's actually dudes that have a problem with my height. I don't care about dating guys shorter than me, though. I would say most of the women I've spoken to that say that they won't date shorter guys who are like 5'8" or taller say that the reason why they won't date shorter guys is because they end up being way more insecure about their height than the woman is like upset about the guy being short. That most shorter guys end up having like short guy syndrome complexes about it, and that it's just not worth the time. That's what I usually hear, but I don't know how true that is statistically or not. But
time in history, more men are attending church than women. And when I started this research, I really came at it from this point of...
Behavioral evolution is more than just recent human experience. for the multiple dating partner thing, or I'm sorry, for men quote unquote spreading their seed, because if you want to get like super animalistic about it or whatever, and that's why this is where all the current Evo Psych research points towards, humans date and procreate in a serially monogamous manner because, one, your offspring is a high investment offspring. A woman who's pregnant left her own devices is less likely to have a successful child who's going to survive to adulthood, and more importantly, to have kids of his own. And two, women's reproductive cycles are hidden from men. You can't tell when a woman is fertile. So if you're a guy who just runs around and fucks a bunch of women, you have no guarantee that you're getting anybody pregnant whatsoever. It's not like cats or dogs that are in heat, so you can tell exactly when to go and impregnate somebody. So the best way for reproductive success evolutionarily in humans is for a person to fuck the same woman for a long period of time to ensure that she actually gets pregnant with his kid. That's on the evolutionary, like biological level. That's how the explanation for that. If you want to just like scream that men are horny and so that's not true or whatever, that's fine. But
is it just me or are there not as many eligible guys? But when I dug into this, I found that both genders really feel misunderstood. And so I asked men and women who has more power in relationships. So equal amounts, men and women said, oh, we have the same amount of power, 42% of that. But then what was so interesting is that 46% of men said women have more power and 46% of women said men have more power. So there's this huge feeling of, oh, the other gender has all of this power. And when I spoke to people, I want to tell you about 3 dating paradoxes that I saw.
uh-oh.
So the first dating paradox for men is this idea that now that women are providers and do not need a man to take care of them financially, they really want guys to step up with emotional support. But here's the paradox. They were not raised and they don't know how to give that emotional support or emotional availability. So we know women, even if they have the same number of friends as guys, the women are talking to their friends much more often.
What do we mean when we say paradox here? That doesn't sound like a paradox. That just sounds like a problem. Is every problem a paradox or? Okay.
Women speak to their kids, even starting at a very young age. They use more emotional language with their daughters and their sons. So constantly we have this feeling where we're asking men to do something when they don't have the skills. I was talking to my friend David, and he said women are in graduate school when it comes to emotional conversations, and guys are in 3rd grade. Right. The other part of the paradox is that women are asking men to be more emotionally open, but then they get shamed when they do that. So we have this great quote from Brene Brown where she says, we beg guys to open up, we beg them to let us in.
Listen, I think it's totally fine to shame men who open up in ways emotionally that are unhinged. The problem is that we don't shame women enough who open up in ways emotionally that are unhinged. The problem there is not how we treat men's emotions. It's that women are given way too much latitude for how they express emotions, all right? We need more bullying on that side, and then everything will be better, all right?
And then when they do, we can't stomach it. And I heard that over and over in my research. There's this quote where a guy says, a woman would rather see me die on the white horse than fall off of it. And so there's this sense that I have to be perfect, I have to be the masculine and the feminine, but I don't have the skills to do that. And women say that they want these guys to be emotional, but as soon as they show emotionality, it can freak those women out. So
I don't like, maybe she would elaborate more in a different environment, but I don't like when, like, being emotional doesn't mean anything. Like, there are ways where if somebody's emotional or whatever, it should freak you the fuck out. Like, it really depends on what we're saying here. Like, there's appropriate ways to show emotion, there's inappropriate ways to show emotion. There are ways where you can be emotional or have a venting moment or whatever in a healthy way. There's ways where it could be a super red flag. I wish she would elaborate more on what she means by that. I always feel like people say this. Like, I've seen text messages of people who say something like, oh yeah, like I got emotional and she just like left me or whatever. And then like when you actually go through the communication that was going on or how they were talking to each other, the guy just was like fucking unhinged. Or I've seen women who are just unhinged. It's like, he's not abandoning you because, you know, he's upset that you displayed your emotions or whatever. He's abandoning you because you're being a fucking psycho. Like, what are you talking about? But it's hard without getting into specific behavior though, when people say this, but I don't know, I'm always a little skeptical of these claims right off the bat. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm extremely skeptical of these claims. I don't believe them because if you get into like manipulator territory, I think most men who are manipulative, and maybe women, I guess to some extent as well, like being emotionally vulnerable at key points is like one of the most successful manipulator strategies that you can deploy as a man. So the idea that like women don't like emotionally available men or men that are emotional, I think it's just bullshit. It just depends on how you show the emotion or what kind of emotion you're showing, but.
One guy that I spoke to for this said, I went on a few dates with this woman. At some point, I told her that my mom had had a suicide attempt. And the next day, she texted me and said, I'm sorry, I can't see you. I cannot process your emotional trauma for you.
Like, I don't know what she's about to say to that, but I'm sorry. Just listen to this again. Excuse me? Hold on.
Freak those women out. So one guy that I spoke to for this said, I went on a few dates with this woman. At some point, I told her that my mom had had a suicide attempt. And the next day, she texted me and said, I'm sorry, I can't see you. I cannot process your emotional trauma for you.
Like, the context for that is very important. What are you guys talking about? You're bringing up the fact that your mom attempted suicide on your first couple of dates. Holy shit. Excuse me. What? Yeah, we call that a red flag. Jesus. But can you give an example of bad and unhinged men emotions? I don't doubt they exist. Just wondering what you think it is. One way might be working through conflict. So if I have an issue with somebody, typically what I do is I just don't talk to that person and I just keep doing my thing and I wait until it goes away and then I pretend that it doesn't exist. I think that might be more common on the male spectrum versus women might be more encouraged or have more training to confront the person, address the issue, figure out a resolution for the problem, and then like you're working through it in a healthier manner and then moving forward, you know? There's a quote from... I'm not going to be able to find this right away. God damn it. Matt Damon's character in The Departed is laying in bed and he mentions something to... Oh, no, they weren't married yet. He mentions something to his girlfriend and he's like, listen, if this relationship isn't going to work out, you're going to have to be the one who leaves because I'll stay in a fucked up thing for my entire life or something like that, you know?
For you.
I don't know. That's generalizable to all men, but...
And so guys are getting a lot of mixed messages. We want you to be feminine. We want you to support us. But when you do, it freaks us out. And so we don't want that. And digging...
But one problem, too, is that if you haven't had, like, any emotional training as a guy, and then you try to be emotional, like, you could just come off as being, like, unhinged. Like, there are appropriate ways to show emotion, and then there are, like, unhinged ways of showing emotion. It just kind of depends. I wish you would give examples here.
Into the research, and I want to look into this more, I think it's that a lot of women want emotional support. They want you to support them in their emotional journeys, but they're not as ready to have you open up in your emotional journey.
And I prefer...
There might be some women like that. I don't agree that's the norm, and I would say that's a woman who's doing that is probably being kind of toxic, but...
Thesis, and I want you to respond to it because I haven't done the research. In market...
Yeah, DRQ 1996, that's a good point. Men have gotten away with doing this because of... Men have gotten away with doing this because anger is just not considered an emotion for some reason. DRQ says, I love that men think women are more emotional, but then 90% of men road rage, get angry as fuck, and have no idea how to regulate it. Yeah, for some reason, men have gotten away with like coding anger as not being an emotion, so they can always call women more emotional. But especially in today's world, actually even in any world, I love it when guys will say shit like, imagine how fucked up the world would be if it was ran by women. And it's like, okay, well, the world ran by men got us the Holocaust. So I don't know what you mean exactly when you say that. I don't know what the implication is there. Like that's a very interesting, you know, we had Genghis Khan, we had, you know, like the world wars, atomic bombs, like mass famines, like multiple genocides. Like what is the implication of that statement? That women would do it worse? Come on.
Getting, we call it consumer dissonance, what people say they want and then what they actually buy. And what women say they want is an emotionally in touch man, and what they want is a masculine man. And that they will articulate what they want in a man, and it includes being more emotionally available, and then they want to have sex with a traditional masculine man. And what I hear from a lot of, and this is anecdotal evidence, and it's pulse marketing, and you tell me what the data says, but there's
the thing is that like, this is another thing I feel too, is if your femininity and your masculinity can both be measured on like a scale from 0 to 100, I think people feel like this is a balance where if you're like 60% feminine, you're 40% masculine. If you're 80% masculine, you're 20% feminine. So when women say they want a more feminine guy, they want a less masculine guy. That's not true. And that weird zero-sumness between both figures is, one, it's betrayed by the reality of the markets today where women have become more masculine and that they have jobs and they can take care of themselves and they can have recreational sex more because of birth control, all this shit, right? Women have become more masculine and still maintain their femininity, especially when it comes to sex. I'd like to slide back into this, into these more traditional roles. When a woman is saying, like, I want a man who's more feminine, they don't mean a man who's less masculine. They just mean a guy who's not emotionally fucking retarded. I wish that people would understand this more. Just because you have more femininity or you're more in touch with your emotional side doesn't mean you have to be like a pussy. But
so many single women in my age group, and it feels like there's literally no men in my age group. As bad as it is for people in their 20s and 30s, try being a woman in your 50s trying to date, right? And they tell me the same thing. These are liberal, progressive, educated women. They say, by the way, I like a manly man.
Yeah.
And they say it under their breath. So there's
this is true. And as somebody that's banged across the aisle, I feel like we were talking about this a couple days ago in a different circumstance, but like the thing that I always hear from liberal women is that they appreciate, or just in my personal experience, that they'll appreciate somebody who's like more open to being bantery or to saying naughty words or to just being like a little bit less of a fucking loser, like a whipped fucking pussy ass bitch, okay? Because a lot of progressive dudes are. And I'll get that from progressive women, but then on the conservative side, they're like, oh, cool, I'm glad you see me as a person and not like some subordinate, disgusting, subhuman fuck who's not like worthy of, you know, addressing as like an equal fucking human being. Like, I feel like conservative women do appreciate the, you can call it feminine progressive qualities or whatever, of like being understood, being treated as a person or whatever. And on the progressive side, like those women do appreciate a guy who will like hold the door open for them, right? Like if you're a young dude and you take a woman on a date, like if you walk around the car and you open the fucking door for her to get in your car, like you're getting huge brownie points for this. No matter how fucking progressive she says she is or how woke or whatever the fuck, every woman appreciates this. It's just every single woman on the planet appreciates stuff like this. But again, you don't have to like take from one to give to the other. You don't have to be less masculine to have like more emotional intelligence. This dichotomy is so stupid that everybody's bought into this.
supposedly is stated around, I need more emotional availability, someone who's in touch with their feelings. But what the research shows is they want a guy with facial hair, who's still, women are still very attracted to traditional masculine attributes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just in such a hard moment because you have women who are saying,
and I feel like for men, I feel like it's pretty similar too, right? Like if you think of, in some ways, maybe, I guess you might be able to find contrary tropes for this, but like a femme fatale character, right? Femme fatale character is like a ultra feminine woman character, but who's also has like incredible aptitude in some highly masculine ways, right? Or what's that one trope, the born sexy yesterday trope, is that like the female character will essentially be like childlike in so many different ways, or sometimes they're literally created yesterday, but they're still incredibly proficient at some very masculine coded activity. Like they're also like an assassin or some like computer subsystem with their brain, like an outlaw star or some shit like that, you know?
I don't want to date a guy who earns less than me. And you might think, okay, well, the data hasn't caught up with the dating. If more women are in higher education and more women are earning more, then maybe you're going to be the one who earns more in your relationship. But what they feel like is projecting out, I'm going to end up doing most of the housework, most of the childcare. I might as well get a guy that can contribute financially.
Yeah.
So they don't want to change their expectations around that. And so I think we truly are in a moment where women are being asked to do more masculine things and men are being asked to do more feminine things. And I think a lot of that is progress, but it also seems to be creating a lot of confusion in the dating world.
Well, but I think a lot of that confusion is coming from the fact that women are doing more masculine things because masculine things are fucking awesome, and men don't want to do more feminine things because, despite what society has tried to sell women for a long time, feminine things just kind of suck. They're kind of boring and they're kind of lame, and nobody wants to do these things.
Yeah, it's sort of, I was just thinking, I coach a lot of young men, and occasionally women ask me for dating advice. And
does he actually do coaching for young men? That's so cool. This guy's such a cool dude. I love this guy. He's like one of my second favorite. Nobody will ever displace Sean Carroll. I want to call him Scott Carroll. Sean Carroll. This is a cool dude.
Thinking, I coach a lot of young men, and occasionally women ask me for dating advice. And you coach, it sounds like a lot of both. And first thing I say to men is I ask them, like, would you want to have sex with you? All right. Are you in shape? What do you look like naked? Do you have a plan? You don't have to be rich now, but do you have a plan? Right? Have you found means of being confident? can you demonstrate kindness and excellence across anything? And the only advice I give women is second coffee. And that is, maybe it wasn't great. I mean, if you don't like the guy and you're just like turned off, fine. But if it was just okay, maybe give it a second coffee.
I have a chapter in my book called Make the Second Date the Default.
Yeah.
And it's really because I feel like I won the lottery with my husband, but he is somebody that takes longer to open up, and he's the slow burn. We met in college, we met again 7 years later, then we were friends for a year.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, the problem that you run into with this, I think, is just the lack of, and this is a thing where, like I said, I'm truly grateful. I'm an online superstar. Not even just that, but like my early job and everything was at a restaurant, everything else. You have an opportunity to be friends with people and to learn how they are, and over time, eventually start dating someone. You have that opportunity if you're in gender combined environments. But I feel like the world has become so much more gender segregated, in that, like, where the fuck are you ever going to spend a lot of time around a person so they can either, come to like you, or you can even learn how to interact with women or whatever. Like, it feels like these spaces are very, very, very hard to find today. That's what it feels like.
And I feel like he's this incredible partner, husband, father, but I don't know that if we'd met just randomly on the first date that I would have gone on a second date. And so I think people really do need to train themselves to look for these slow burns.
Logan, Scott said something there about what he thinks women want, which is these sort of traditional masculine features. Is this what you see in the data?
I feel like the real world hasn't changed. I don't know. I'm curious. And this actually could be, I could be dramatically overplaying my own, like our lived experience because of the communities that we're in, right? Because like the computer programmer world, like all those kinds of male coded jobs are heavily gender segregated. They're super duper gender segregated. Maybe it's not that way across the entire job market. I guess there's no reason to think it would be that way across the entire job market, but yeah, if I was like single today and I had like no online presence and I had no job with like women, I don't think I would ever like, go to a bar to meet somebody. God, bro, fuck me. It just seems like such a miserable fuck environment because you're literally doing a crapshoot. Like, I don't know any of the, like, I don't even know. I don't know what you do for like joined, like joint activities where like men and women are doing a thing together. That's not fucking miserable. This is why school is so nice. Listen, just try to meet somebody in school. If you don't meet anybody in school, then it's fucking over for you, okay? Good luck. I'm just kidding, but not really.
What's hard is I think Scott's right, offering more.
No, I just went back. God damn it. Wait.
And that they end.
Wait, she just said offering more. Wait, did I click transcript? Show transcript. Scott's right. Okay.
Sort of traditional masculine features. Is this what you see in the data?
What's hard is I think Scott's right about what people say they want versus stated versus revealed preferences. So according to the research that I did, women are saying the number one thing that they're looking for is kindness and compassion. That's also what men are saying that they're looking for. So in many ways, this is great. People are looking for the same things, but I just feel like there's these huge disconnects now where people don't feel like they can get what they want.
Men are saying they want kindness and compassion.
I made them say, what are all the things that you care about? And then what is the number one thing that you care about?
Like, I feel like doing surveys like this is so hard. And I'm sure the surveyors think about it, but like there's so many things that are baked into a question like that and so many assumptions that are being made that it's hard to know what people are actually, like people are pretending, like people will present this very negatively. Like they'll say, when somebody says something like revealed preferences, they'll go like, oh, this person is lying. What they actually want is this. But like, I think that one thing that's happening is people just have a lot of default assumptions about the type of people they'll see. And so they don't even put that on a preference. So for instance, if I were to say, what do you value the most in a woman? Let's say guys are filling out these surveys and some are, all right, well, let's say kindness, whatever, rises to the top. And then let's say that I introduce you to like 30 women. And let's say every single woman that I introduce you to has fucking leprosy. Like if you meet enough women with leprosy, at some point, were you lying? Like, let's say these are the kindest women in the world. Were you lying when you said you wanted a woman who was kind? Like at some point you might start to change. Like, wait, hold on. actually, what I prefer, I want a healthy woman. I want somebody who's in good physical health, because that's the thing that I am missing the most right now. These women are unhealthy. This is not good, right? If you're a woman and you've met a bunch of guys who might already kind of like fit, like, yeah, he's masculine enough, but like they're all emotionally retarded. And then you put something where you're like, the number one thing I'm looking for are guys that are emotionally intelligent. But then you look at who the woman is, selecting. It's like, wow, why is she with a bunch of masculine guys? What the fuck? It seems like she lied. I don't know if that's a lie so much as like, it's easy to find that class of people. It's harder to find that class of people with this extra trait, right? I'm sure there are some ways of accounting for this in survey data, but I don't know if that made sense or not.
About and kindness and compassion was first for both of them.
The stuff I've seen or the stuff I've read is that for women, and I've talked to men about this, number one is they have to signal resources. And we don't like to say it out loud. And by the way,
this guy is like he's like on all the red pill hype.
Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a Range Rover and a Panerai now, but you have a plan, right? You have your shit together. You go home at midnight when everyone's partying because you have to be up for work. You work out, which shows a level of discipline and that you can commit to something. You're in school. You've got a good job. This person is going to have resources. And I don't think that's changed a whole lot. I think a man's ability to
I think that's changed a lot because the resource thing just isn't as much an obsession when the woman can work. I think this is part of I feel like this is an important point because this is part of what's made the environment so much more difficult for men, because I feel like a long time ago, a man could just say, hey, I have a job, right? Like you kind of have to be with me if you want to amount to shit in the world because you're a woman and you clearly can't do anything. But now a woman is like, okay, well, I have a job too. And it's like, whoa, okay, excuse me. Now you're fucked. Because now you have to compete for something, with more than just your wallet. And now it becomes a lot more difficult. But
signal future resources has gone down.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's become any less of a criteria. Number two is intellect. And it's very instinctual because if you make good decisions for the tribe, your kids are more likely to survive. Someone who's smart is more likely to take care of your offspring than someone who's stupid. What's interesting, and I love this, is the fastest way to communicate intellect is humor. And I joke, and this is bad, but I say, this is my impression of a woman. I'm laughing, I'm naked. And that is, I've always thought if a guy can make a woman laugh, she will date him. And then the third thing, and this is where guys screw up. This is what I tell a guy's secret weapon is. It's kindness.
I thought it was hip. I'm just kidding.
Women want to see that you are a good person. You treat service staff well. You're good to your parents. You have manners. You treat people well, even with no reciprocal expectation, because they know that a kind person, if and when she's vulnerable and needs help and maybe isn't bringing as much to the table for certain periods of time, that this is a kind man. And, sure, you want to do your best to signal resources and have a plan. Sure, maybe you're smart, maybe you aren't. There's not a lot you can do there. But the secret weapon, I think, for men that they don't leverage, and I do think it's a practice, is to demonstrate kindness. And we don't talk about that enough as men. It's like, well, okay, and it's little things. Have good manners. Be thoughtful. Follow up with people. And I think that, anyways, those are the three things that I have read women want in men.
Okay, there's so much there. So one is I do think we need a new definition for modern masculinity or mature masculinity or evolved masculinity. And I think that that's why this moment feels so painful, is that we don't have it. Because I agree with you. I don't think women are saying, I want a feminine man. I think they want a modern masculine man. And so that means somebody who is decisive and can provide, but also somebody
has the feminine
who's
traits.
able to communicate with them emotionally. And so one of the suggestions that I came here today to talk about is this idea of men's groups. So about a year ago, my friend David Clavins, who happens to be a world-class magician, came to my husband and said, I'm going to form this men's group. And so it's about 6 or 7 men, and they meet together monthly, and they have they have formed this council of peers. So every month that they get together, every guy sits down with Post-it notes and says the 2 issues that are most pressing for him. So first of all, I think that that's a great way of doing it because it's actually that time to say, what am I struggling with? I think many people in their lives, maybe especially men, don't sit there and saying, what's top of mind for me? So guys get the quiet time to do that. Then they go around in a circle, and whoever has the most pressing issue, they get to take their time. And some men might say, these are top of mind.
The issue with these discussions is that they talk about all the qualities men should have, but men just try to emulate them and not actually develop them. That's because these are generally these are qualities that you develop through a lifetime of social education, starting in school and in the household, right? So this is going to be an almost impossible thing for a guy to just randomly develop in his 20s or 30s or 40s.
For me, but it's not a priority. I'll give the time to someone else. And each month they talk about what's going on for them. They hold each other accountable. So month 3, they might say, hey, David, you've been talking about that for the last 3 months. Are you going to actually do anything about it? And I love that these men have a masculine space to actually go through what's going on for them. Because maybe they have wives and girlfriends they can go to. Maybe they don't. But I think it's a different type of advice that you get from a council of trusted peers. And I really do think that men's groups could change a lot of these issues, because I can sit here and say everybody should be in therapy. Guess what? Therapy's really expensive, and many insurance companies
Not with BetterHelp. Hello?
will not provide it, or there's a huge waiting list. And so if we just sit around for all these guys to go to therapy, that's not going to happen. But men's groups are a way that men can lead each other. They can provide this tribe of peers. And I have just seen so many changes in this group. So David told me his story where he had a lot of anger about his mom's debilitating illness. And he wasn't really experiencing it, and it was coming out as anger at his mom, but he wasn't conscious of that. But by getting the anger out in a safe place with men, the only place where he felt like he could truly be angry, he was able to get over it and to actually treat his mom with a lot more empathy. Or my husband has gone to the group and talked about ego stuff at work, or how hard the transition to becoming a parent has been. And I feel like the men in this group have grown so much over the 12 months that it's been happening that I just paid for my brother-in-law to be in a men's group. And I want there to be tons of men's groups, because I really feel like this isn't an issue that a therapist or a mom or I can really solve. I think men need to be solving this problem within themselves.
What you said is really powerful, because if you walk down the hallway at Stern, there's Golden Seeds, women in venture capital, Black Women's Consulting Club. There are women's support groups. There's nothing for men. And these groups are really wonderful. Man Talks is one that I've been looking at, where they've said, let's get together and just be supportive of each other. And it's a fairly new phenomenon.
Yeah. I think people are afraid of men gathering because traditionally bad things have happened in that.
Gangs.
Right.
I don't think it's people are afraid of men gathering. I think the issue is that these types of initiatives are usually thought of by people on the left, and a lot of the left has kind of been just mind fucked by this oppressor-oppressee paradigm, in which case you should never help men with literally anything ever, because all men are part of the oppressive class, and so fuck them.
Gangs, I'm just thinking of like many situations in which
funny.
like if once there's a tiki torch, I want there to be some women there, right? Like, so there's a reason why people have been fearful of this. Or it's like when the whole world was a men's group, a men's club, you didn't need to have men's clubs.
Yeah.
But I think in this moment, this is a really powerful, organic, grassroots way for men to change. So I imagine that you have group chats with men that are your peers that you go to for advice. And I feel like there's men out there that don't have that. And we are meant to make decisions by getting advice from other
group
people.
chat.
I personally have a board of directors that in my life, when I'm going to make a big decision, I meet with them. So when I took my last job, when I decided to move, all of these different things, I meet with my board of directors and I say, what am I not seeing? What are my blind spots? And they've given me a lot of good and hard advice. And I think we all need to be building our own board of directors. And for men, that might be this men's group.
Do you mind if I pause this conversation for a moment? I want to talk about our show sponsor today, which is Shopify. I've
What?
always believed
How's that
that
gonna
the
help me
biggest
find
cost in
therapy?
business isn't failure. It's the time you waste trying to make decisions. Time spent hesitating, overthinking, or waiting for the right moment. When I started my first company at 20 years old, I had no experience and no money.
You're
What I
20,
did
of
have
course,
was
you
an
have nothing.
idea and the willingness to move fast.
Why would you?
And that made all the difference. If you've been thinking about starting your own business, Shopify makes this entire process so much easier. With thousands of customizable templates, you don't need coding or design skills. You just need a willingness to start. Shopify connects all your sales channels from your website to social media, and it handles the back-end payments, shipping, and taxes too, so that you can stay focused on moving forward and growing your business. If you're ready to start, visit shopify.com/Bartlett
Will do.
and sign up for a £1 per month trial period.
Let's go.
That's shopify.com/Bartlett.
On my way.
It is hard as a as a young man to share how you feel with other young men, even if they're like your best friends. It's so much easier just to roast each other.
Yeah.
True.
Like my group chat with my guys
Yeah.
is probably a little bit more advanced in terms of emotional
Yeah.
openness, but most of it's just like a war zone. We're like criticizing each other, attacking each other, but that's kind of our way of showing love. And then you'll have once every 2 weeks, someone will be going through something. So like one of my friends now, they've just found out that there's a complication with the pregnancy and the tone shifts and we all become supportive. But my girlfriend tells me how rare that is, that we have this space where we'll talk about our emotions and how we're feeling, and we'll switch from like trying to kill each other in the most like funny way to being really, really emotionally supportive. A lot of men don't have that.
Well, it's so funny that you said that because my husband's really funny and so are some of the other guys in the group. And they actually had to talk about how they needed to be less funny because the humor was becoming a distraction. And somebody brought up, you know, in their own male way, like, I think that sometimes we're about to go deep and then someone makes a joke. And even though that joke was really good, we don't go back to where we were and we don't go as deep. So they actually
That guy kicked out of the group chat. He was a fucking pussy. Get him the fuck out of here.
work on being less funny in that group. But look at the work that you do. You sit for hours a week and you learn and you ask people questions and you're working on yourself. I'm not surprised that you have a group of peers that you can go to for that. But I would wager that the average man doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are going to be so many women who are listening and watching this and they're like, I want that for my husband.
What is the evolutionary basis for this? This is what I was thinking the whole time. I was like,
What?
did we lose the man's group at some point in our past? And is that why we're adding it back into our lives? Like, what used to do this job before?
So what I've heard, and I think evolutionary biology, you always have to take certain things with a grain of salt because people can kind of explain away anything with it. But it's that a lot of times men were sitting next to each other and they were having these conversations on the savannah. And that's often why like guys prefer to do activities side by side and not facing each other. And so you had men who were in conversation with their peers or, you know,
And outside.
And outside.
Fishing.
Yeah.
Hey, heard you getting divorced.
Right. Right. Or it's like, you know, why it's so good to have conversations in the car. I feel like you had a lot of men that were in groups at church. You had men who were in the Elks Club. You had veterans that were meeting. We actually feel like this is a time where much fewer men are getting together. And this is all of the amazing research that's happening now around loneliness, is that the average young guy is spending many fewer hours a week with their peers face to face. So even though a guy might be catching up with his friend playing video games, I just don't think that that's the same thing. And so I feel like we need this in-person time with our friends to develop these relationships.
There's probably another issue too, is probably just there's a lot more emotional complexity in the world today as well, right? Like I imagine like picking partners and mates and like navigating things like college. Like if you think about it, if you go back like 6,000 years, like what is your rite of passage as a young man? It's probably just becoming like a better hunter, or you're doing whatever rite of passage is to become a man, to become a better hunter. And it's not like at 18 years old, 10,000 years ago, it's like, okay, well, what type of thing do you want to specialize in for the rest of your fucking life? Okay. And what hyper specific area of study do you want to, like, everything was so much more generalized back then.
And instead
Back
we
in the
have
day.
people on TikTok, people on Twitch watching other people live their lives.
True.
You brought up
Just
two
kidding.
interesting
Ignore
things.
her.
One is
She's a hater.
Your friend group. I have a similar group. Same eight guys I lived with my freshman year at UCLA. For 30 or 40 years, we've been kind of constant contact, email now on WhatsApp. When your friend had something bad happen to him, I think for a long time, men have weighed in and showed empathy for each other. What none of my male friends have ever done, their friend group would say, is I've never heard one of my male friends go, I'm depressed. I'm just super fucking lonely and depressed. You just don't hear that from men. I'm struggling with anger. I'm all of a sudden I have erectile dysfunction. I've never heard one of my male friends, when their mom dies or they get divorced, we weigh in with a lot of empathy, but you never hear them really open up because men are worried that if we display weakness, another man might kill us and take our shit from us, or the women aren't going to want to have sex with us. So
I don't think it's that primal. I think the issue is you're just not used to it as a guy. You just don't really ever do these things. And when you don't have the experience of doing them, as stupid as it sounds, sometimes it's hard to even know like why you should. Like this sounds kind of retarded, but I remember a few years ago, I started to try to like actively, sometimes it's bit me in the ass, but I would try to like actively communicate my problems to other people to have a back and forth. And it's autistic as it sounds to say, like I learned very quickly that like, oh, communicating a problem to another person that understands the problem that you're communicating, just that happening in and of itself, that's actually a really good feeling. It feels nice to communicate a problem to somebody and then have somebody say like, oh, I understand your problem. And that sounds like it sucks. Like just for me, I'd never even, I don't know, I just never really considered like, it seems like a waste of time. It's like, oh, actually, no, this is actually a pretty good feeling. I'm glad I talked to this person about this, you know? If you've never even had the experience of doing a particular thing, then you don't even want to do the thing because what the fuck is even the point? You don't even know if there's a benefit to it, you know?
So there's still, I think, a huge inability for men to proactively talk about how they're really feeling.
But I don't think I ever avoided it before subconsciously or, you know, consciously because I was worried about being judged or anything else. Like it wasn't even something as like primal as that or something as like, you know, deep or dark as that. It was more just like, oh, I don't know, I've never even done it before. I don't even think about it.
And then you talked about a board of directors. A great board of directors for a man in his 20s, not unfortunately, is a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I'll just use personal experience. I had a great girlfriend when I was 24, and she basically said to me, if you don't stop getting high every night, I'm going to stop having sex with you. That was very motivating for me. I really liked being with a partner. Without the guardrails of a...
I felt like you have to be really, really, really careful with stuff like that, though, because you don't want to, or I don't know, maybe it does work for some people. I feel like it's not a good, or it's not a healthy trend for a relationship if your partner is essentially becoming your parent, right? I think there's good ways that your partner can motivate you, but if it's literally like, you're so gross, and if you don't stop this thing, I'm gonna, you know, like I'm not gonna fuck you or whatever, I feel like at some point you're gonna run into an issue where your partner just sees you as their child. You don't want to be stuck in that world.
Romantic relationship, I think men are just, I don't want to say lost, but women create more social connections outside of a romantic relationship. And sometimes that absence of a romantic relationship, they pour that energy into friendships and their professional life, whereas men start pouring it into video games and Reddit and porn. So the fact that only 1 in 3 men in America under the age of 30 has a girlfriend and 2 in 3 women has a boyfriend, you think, well, that's mathematically impossible. It's not, because women are dating older because they want more economically and emotionally viable men. If I hadn't been in relationships that were great guardrails for me in terms of my own behavior, my own ambition, men need, without the prospect or the existence of a romantic relationship, men have worse outcomes than women who don't have. And do you agree with what I'm saying? Does the research bear that out?
You know, it's interesting because part of me where my head goes is like, are you asking women to do the emotional labor of raising men? And when you phrase it like that, it sounds really negative.
Yeah.
But from anecdotal experience from my own life, you know, I've been with my husband for 10 years. I think we both really shaped each other. But like even yesterday, he texted me and he's like, I'm going to get an Uber instead of renting a car at the airport. You've taught me how to be such a savvy traveler. Like that's a small example, but it's like you really do influence each other. And I think sometimes about my single friends and how they go to bed at night and they don't have a person next to them to give them advice and to listen to them talk about their day. And I think that when we're in long-term relationships, there's an element of raising each other and building.
I think there's a couple of reasons why I don't want to talk to other people about shit that's going wrong. It feels like, stop typing on my chat. I think it feels kind of good in a weird way to wallow in your own sadness, and I also feel like a burden putting these feelings on others and pressuring them to comfort me. So the problem with you saying that is, in my personal experience, the people that need to have those thoughts don't, and they just permanently wallow in their own self-pity, and they're the worst types of energy vampires to be around. But then some people that worry about doing that too much are absolutely people who should take a moment sometimes to wallow. It's not always bad to do it. And if you're the kind of person who doesn't have a lot of like self-pity moments, most of your friends will be either understanding or, I don't want to say like excited in like almost like a perverted way. It was like, oh, this guy's like actually opening up a little bit to me emotionally. Like most people around you will appreciate that. Nobody's going to crucify you. This is why I never believe these stories. And I know that people, red pillers especially, hate me for saying this. Like, I never believe these stories of these men who are like, I'm always this like proud, lonely, strong, silent type for my girl, and then one day I opened up emotionally and then she ditched me. Like, I don't believe that. I think most people are, as long as you're not somebody who's doing it all the fucking time in an unhinged manner, I think most people are pretty appreciative of somebody like having a moment like that and sharing it with somebody else. But
building memories together and making each other better and having that investment.
1 + 1 = 3.
Right. And that's why all these women that come to me and all these men that are looking for love, that want relationships, and something is happening right now where the gap just seems to be widening and these relationships aren't happening. And this is even true in teenage relationships. So it used to be that for baby boomers and Gen X, 3/4 of men had had a relationship in their teen years. And now it's under 50%. And so if you start building your relational skills at an early age, then you get better and better at dating over time. But if, as you said, by the time you're 30, you haven't been in a relationship, that's seen as a red flag to a lot of people. And so I think we have a problem now, but I'm really projecting that we're going to have a much greater problem in the future.
I think a real enemy of relationships and mating for people in their 20s that we haven't talked a lot about. I had Dr. Anna Lemke from Stanford on my pod talking about addiction, and something we're just starting to come to grips with. And as I read more about it, I think porn is really...
Let's talk about porn.
Well,
haters.
Personal experience. I used to go on campus. The only reason I graduated from UCLA, I graduated with a 2.27 GPA. If I graduated with a 1.97, I wouldn't have graduated. Not the only motivator, but a real motivator for me was the prospect of meeting someone. I could go onto campus and there might be a chance I'd meet friends, be social, and possibly meet a potential romantic partner. It was very motivating. And if I'd had porn on this and on my screen, always available, I'm not sure I would have gone on campus. I would have spent a lot more time.
It's possible that I'm just like, I don't understand because of my generation, I guess, and this maybe wasn't as much of a thing growing up. I've never, ever, ever felt this, that like porn is a substitute for real human interaction ever. But maybe younger people have this feeling. I don't know. It seems weird to me.
At home. And unfortunately, the deepest pocketed, most talented companies in the world are trying to convince young people that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen with an algorithm. And what I say to young men I coach is that I'm not going to tell you not to consume porn, but try to modulate it, because I think that fire of wanting to meet someone and wanting to demonstrate excellence and having perseverance and enduring rejection and getting your shit together and dressing well and smelling nice and showering, for God's sakes, that mojo, that desire is incredibly important for society. And we're taking young men's mojo away with frictionless, open access, on-demand porn.
Have you seen these no-fap communities?
Yeah.
Have you seen this?
Yes.
Okay, so I was listening to this episode of Modern William with Chris Williamson, and he was interviewing Hamza, who was self-identifying as a former red-pilled person. And he was talking about how much it changed his life to try to enter the no-fap community.
Which means?
No masturbation. And so I do think that porn is a huge problem. My first job out of college was running the porn pod for Google. So what this meant was that we would sell ads for the porn advertisers. This team does not exist anymore. This was a long time ago. My parents were like, I sent you to Harvard and now you're selling ads for pornography. But when I look back, I'm like, what was I perpetuating? Because I feel like there's just so many problems with what technology is doing in terms of replacing human connection. So let's just project out. ChatGPT is already amazing. I'm currently in my Google feed getting ads for Replica, and the ads say, get your perfect AI boyfriend, always there for you.
Maya and Miles.
So you think about the fact that real life relationships are messy. I tell my husband on a weekly basis, please throw your contact lens in the garbage. And every week we have a disagreement about that. Well, guess what? Your online girlfriend, she doesn't nag you. She doesn't tell you to pick up your socks. She only tells you how great you are and always tells you, that you're doing the right thing and how was your day. Then you insert sex robots. Okay, so you have your emotional needs met, you have your sexual needs met. Maybe you're watching porn while engaging with your sex robots. Why would you want to go through the very challenging potential rejection of real life relationships? And I feel like if all these things come to pass, which it seems very likely that they will, we are truly in a crisis moment when it comes to birth rate and future generations.
And it impacts them. It'll impact the economy because the skills you have to develop to be successful in the mating market are life skills. You have to be able to endure rejection. You have to have a sense of humor. You have to be able to read the room. Show me a guy who's good in a bar, I'll show you a guy who'll probably be good in a boardroom. And the skills you have to develop as a young man, if you want a romantic and a sexual relationship, pay dividends the rest of your life. And if you don't develop those skills, I think it impacts your life across a bunch of dimensions.
This is something I'm worried about for Gen Z in general. So I did a ton of research with post-pandemic Gen Z daters, men and women in the UK and the United States. And such a big theme that came out of it was that they don't have rejection resilience. And I think that we hear this in many aspects of life. So someone that I'm close to, he's the former dean of Brown, he's a professor there. And he was talking about how it used to be that his office hours were empty and that's when he could do his reading or play solitaire. But now students come basically saying, tell me exactly what's gonna be on the test. Tell me exactly what to write in my paper, because they are not willing to fail. I have friends who are managers at Google and they give somebody feedback in a Google Doc and the person is crying because they take that as extreme rejection. And so if you don't have the resilience built up
100%.
to fail, then you are not going to take risks. And everything in life.
I feel like we're talking about very, very different things here when we talk about like job performance or whatever. I don't think all resiliency is the same. I think you can probably find some people that are incredibly resilient in certain areas, like related to job feedback, but have little to no resiliency in terms of rejection for dating related stuff. I think that like if you get rejected on some job stuff, there are a lot of different reasons why it could happen. There's a lot of different ways that you can cope. And you might even, maybe, depending on the job, might even be able to just say, like, oh, fuck, I did a bad thing on this particular job. But when it comes to rejection relating to dating stuff, this is like a, I think you...
Attention all residents. Attention all residents. This is... Everything is under control. Do not be alarmed. Thank you.
There was a false alarm. What was a false alarm? Oh, they're about to do a fucking fire alarm test. Kill me. Getting rejected by somebody in a dating environment, I feel like people view that more likely as like a referendum almost on like their personality or who they are. It's like being rejected as like a streamer. Like it's hard to lose viewership or lose popularity because you feel like you're a bad person or like you're a worse person because of it. Like, oh fuck, like people don't like me. There's something wrong with me. So I don't know if resiliency built in some areas is going to carry over to like dating related stuff, but I don't know.
Life worth having is worth taking a risk for. And so I feel that I have my dream job. Nobody messaged me on LinkedIn and said, hey, Logan, do you want to study dating and relationships? No, I invented this job and now I get to have it. And same thing is true with relationships. It's not about waiting for the perfect person to show up. It's about becoming a great person who somebody else chooses and going after what you want.
I want to talk about all of this, and specifically...
It's because the word rejected is too strong. It should really be thought of as not interested. It's going to feel worse. It's going to feel bad regardless. No matter what you call it, it's always going to feel bad.
Offer some solutions to the young, to the parents, to the boys, to the teens, to the men that are listening. We had a young man actually write in on this subject. And he said, I've suffered with crippling loneliness, and so I've spent over $1,000 hiring women online just to talk to me and to keep me company. On top of that, I've spent several $1,000s more engaging in other business with them. After doing this for nearly a year now,
What, like consulting or?
Still feel incredibly unfulfilled. And on the subject of porn, 30% of internet traffic is now related to porn, with about 80% of that porn traffic coming from men and 20% coming from women. I actually had a conversation on this podcast before about porn, and funnily enough, the top comment was, by the way, us women get porn addicted too, because it was a bit of a blind spot to me, but I think that's something that's worth acknowledging. And the stats are staggering in terms of how higher porn consumption correlates to higher probabilities of depression. What do you do about it? Like on an individual level, I get it. Try not to watch porn, but I mean, that doesn't seem like incredibly great advice, because if you're lonely, you're not getting laid, no one wants to date you for all the reasons we've talked about today. Restraint seems to be a pretty shitty solution.
I'll give this one to Scott.
Okay, so I coach young men. I take 2 to 3 on at any time. And I don't know if this is the right way, but it's my way.
Maybe some people consume porn for different reasons. I don't know. I can never imagine like I'm really lonely and I have no human interaction, so I'm gonna watch porn to substitute that. Or maybe it just happens naturally and people don't think about it. I don't know, it seems very strange to me, but I don't know, maybe.
I'm like, you got to lean into your advantage. When you're our age, you have capital, you have more money than time. They have capital, they have a lot of time. And I ask them to unlock their screen, and I say to them, I gamble with options. I gamble. At my age, I still gamble. I preach about low-cost index funds and I buy call options. That makes no fucking sense. It's gambling, but I know it. I watch porn. I try and modulate my use so I can put the majority of my sexual energy into my partner, but I watch porn because I want them to not feel like I'm going to judge them. And they unlock their phone. And I say, we're going to find 8 to 12 hours a week of time, of capital, and we're going to reinvest
Only 8 to 12 hours a week for masturbating? Is that enough time?
that capital in higher ROI investments. It is so easy to find 8 to 12 hours. I can sometimes find 7 hours or 15 hours just in TikTok.
You look at screen time.
I look at screen time and I say, all right, come through with me.
Yeah.
We're going to find 8 to 12 hours. And then we're going to reinvest that capital in 3 investments. 1, we're going to start working out and getting fit. You're going to work out 3 times a week with weights. You should be able, the human male form is spectacular. You should be able to walk into any room under the age of 30 if you're a man and know that if shit got real, you could kill and eat everybody or outrun them. I need you to be
What
strong.
if all those other guys have you as the life coach and they all also go to the gym? Oh no. Get a gun.
You're going to be more mentally healthy. You're going to be kinder. Look at the people who break up fights at bars. They're big, strong men. Look at the people who defend their country. You want to be strong as a man. It feels fucking amazing. Testosterone, your bone structure, your muscle mass, it's amazing. Lean into that. We're going to get strong. 2, you got to start making some money. And the kids are, to be honest, the kids I'm coaching are really struggling. These are kids at home at the age of 23 with their mom, not getting along with their mom, nothing going on. If you have a phone, you can make money. I don't care if it's Lyft, TaskRabbit, because you get a taste for the flesh. And the way to start making a lot of money is to start making a little bit of money, because you start to figure out the economy. How could I make more money? Maybe at some point, could I buy a car and hire a driver to be an Uber? What is the way, could I get a certification in plumbing? You start figuring out, and you start getting your greed glands get going. Oh my God, it's awesome to have money. I can go out. I can go to a concert.
I don't know the age of the men he's coaching, or maybe they already go to school. I guess I don't know. Maybe it just depends on the person. Nathan tried to ask me about this recently. He's like, oh, I think I want to get a job. I don't know how you communicate to kids. I shouldn't even communicate to Nathan this way because it wouldn't work for me. But I'm like, listen, bro, if you want to do good in life and you're under the age of 18, holy fucking Christ, okay? Every extra second of your day, just fucking pour it into school. It will pay off dividends. You do not realize this right now, but when you are 18 and you start applying to colleges, or when you're 22 and you're graduating with a shit degree, you're going to hate yourself. Oh, he said it was for 23-year-old guys? Okay, then maybe it's different. They're already past the education point in their life, sure. Yeah, never mind. Yeah. If you are a kid, if you're listening to me and you're under 18, oh my fucking God, 30 minutes a night more for school, okay? Whatever the fuck, just holy shit, it will pay off in dividends. You are in the only time period in your life when you can, just invest in yourself. You don't have to worry about any other fucking bullshit. Or, you have to worry about the ordinary bullshit of coming into adolescence and all that bullshit. But, do it. Jesus Christ, do it. At what age does that end? The age that ends is the age when you have to wake up and do some fucking lame-ass bullshit because you have rent to pay. And that's the rest of your life, okay?
It gets those greed glands going. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to put ourselves in the company of strangers in the agency of something bigger than ourselves twice a week. Church group, softball league, nonprofit, charity, whatever it is. And then 3A, and I've just started doing this. I've only done it 2 times. And it's an exercise, and I say, and it goes to I think no is the way to success. Show me someone who's successful, I'm going to show you a shit ton of no's. I ran for sophomore, junior, senior class president, lost all 3 times, decided to run for senior class president, lost. I applied to...
You couldn't have given this advice 6 years ago? Yes, I could have, and I would have. I would give this advice at literally any point in life, and I would find a way to go back and abuse myself until I would take this advice, because I know I wouldn't listen to it growing up, but yes.
38 jobs, I got 1 offer, 9 schools, rejected by 7. My whole life has been about no. And that's why I'm successful, is I was always able to endure it. So I say to them, this is what I want you to do. I need you to go up to a stranger at wherever we're doing, church group, Riders Club, whatever it might be, education, continuing education. And you're going to ask them out for coffee. It's a friend. Hey, what are you doing? Do you want to watch the game? Do you want to watch the Liverpool game this weekend? Let's go to a bar. If it's a woman you might have an attracted to, hey, try and get a rap going. Would you like to have coffee? And here's the...
You can just say 30 minutes more learning skills. It doesn't have to be in school. I guess, but you have to be careful what skills you're learning because like the whole grind set culture kind of like mind fuck people on this. It has to be like a marketable skill. Like if the skill that you want to learn is picking up like a programming for dummies book and like working on projects or something like that, or if you want to start buying fucking 2x4s from Home Depot and learning how to fucking, I don't know, build cabinets, stuff like that. Like these are good long-term skill investments. But if your grind is learning how to drop ship or do any of this other like worthless online bullshit that is like not going to translate to fuck all unless you happen to be the 0.001% who lucks out on something, like it's a horrible use of your time. That's why school is generally nice, is because as long as you pick a decent degree, you can always be oriented in a profitable direction in your future. On your own, you run the risk of making a really fucking stupid decision.
Goal. The goal is no, and we're going to celebrate no. Because you're going to call me and I'm going to say, did you ask someone out for coffee or to a bar? And most likely they'll have said no. They'll be polite, but they'll come with an excuse. And then I'm going to ask you if you're okay. And you're going to say yes. And that's the victory.
It's interesting because if you go on TikTok or if you go on X, you'll find a lot of videos of women filming themselves as a guy inappropriately came and made a gesture to them and then like publicly shaming them on the internet. It's very popular to do it in the gym.
Yeah.
They set up a phone, they're working out, a guy comes over and asks if they need help with the weights. It then goes viral online because that guy was being inappropriate. Like you shouldn't. So like as a guy, it's quite complicated to know how and where you can roll up without being filmed and going viral.
While it happens, this is exceptionally rare. Most people don't have to worry about stuff like this. Most of the time, this is not going to happen to you. Although I guess you could argue that seeing it happen online makes it spooky regardless, but...
No. So we talked about the first dating paradox, which is this the idea that women now need more from men and are raising the bar because they can be providers on their own, but men weren't taught how to do that, and there's sometimes shame for it. So I think the second big dating paradox is that men are expected to lead and to approach, but I truly feel like in a post-Me Too era, it's much more confusing. And so many people say to me, I don't want to meet on an app, that's not romantic, I want to meet in real life. But I'm not finding that people are meeting in real life because people are afraid to approach each other. I think
a big problem is this, is that you just don't have any of the social training from being in areas where like men and women are both doing stuff. I think it's really, really, really bad if you don't spend a lot of time around women and then you try to get into like learning how to date or flirt with people. It's like an impossible task to do, I think.
Is being afraid of being called creepy. Mm-hmm. But the other one, which is what you're talking about, is that this culture of making TikToks or going online with this datertainment to talk about how this person approached you or how inappropriate that was. And so I feel like there's a lot of women waiting for men to approach them, but then shaming the men who do. I think one of the solutions there is we should allow people to shoot their shot in a non-creepy way.
Can I just say something to that? If the guy rolls up and he's 6'4" and he's gorgeous, it's fine, it seems.
The difference between creepy and romantic is the perceived attractiveness to the person making the overture.
The difference between creepy and romantic is whether or not the woman feels like she has the opportunity to leave. That's always the case. Being the mega chat or being 6'4", whatever, is not necessarily true. Maybe more attractive people can get away with it to some extent, but if you approach a woman and it feels like you're fucking trapping her, like you're almost always going to have bad results. Whereas if you're approaching somebody and they feel like the opportunity to say no or just walk away or it's more in passing, you're always going to have better results. This idea that like Chad Alpha Cock can approach in any way he wants is just generally not the case. Like,
I think that is true. If you are super hot, it's less likely to be perceived as creepy. But you have all these people that are saying, I want to be approached, and they're not being approached. And so there was this rise of run clubs last summer, right? Everyone said the new dating app is the run club. I ask everywhere I go, have you met someone at a run club? No, people are not really meeting there.
And also if you join a thing just to find a partner, I don't actually know if that's a good thing either. Because I think if people get the vibe that you're literally just here trying to fuck, like it's probably not an attractive or a good thing. It probably just feels weird. Like if you meet somebody at a club thing like this because you guys share the attraction legitimately, then that's probably a much easier way to meet somebody than just like, oh, hey, what's up? I joined this because I'm trying to fuck you. Like, you want to hang out? It's like, okay.
So since 2017, the number one way that people are meeting is online. Right. Hinge is setting up a date every 2 seconds. This is where the dating is happening. If people want more things to happen offline, they actually have to approach each other. And I'm just not seeing that happen.
But
that's not singly true. If some horrid-looking archetype came up to a woman and asked her out in the gym, she has plenty of opportunity to leave. The guy is just creepy, e.g., exceptionally unattractive. But that's my opinion. Well, it's if your way of hitting on a girl at the gym is you're like passing by and you compliment her because you say she looks good or whatever. I mean, it depends on. We can go into how you compliment somebody too. It's a lot different than if a woman is on a machine and you walk up to her and you compliment her and then you take the machine right next to her. Like that, I don't know how to explain this. As a guy, I don't think we think about this very often because men don't really have physical space in the same way. The only time a guy is like super aware of his physical space is when he's with a confrontational man or when there's a gay guy in the area. But women are very aware of this all the time, especially when other men are involved. And if you try to compliment a woman in an area where you're going to remain fixed and she's going to remain fixed. When I say she can't leave, I mean, you don't want to go to an area where she has to like retreat, but there's just it's an electrifyingly different feeling. I mean that in a negative way versus a guy give you a compliment like passing by. You can't go to some place and park yourself next to somebody because then it doesn't feel like you're giving a compliment. It feels like you're taking them hostage with words that you've said, and now they have to return it in a certain way, or there's going to be a huge fucking problem, and they know that you're going to follow up with more, and it's just like that's a horrible, horrible, horrible feeling. Yeah, it's not good.
My understanding is the majority of women still expect the man to take the...
Okay, I don't want to roast you, okay, because I already have asked. Listen, I don't know how many women are left in my audience, okay? I'm going to say this politely. Hold on. Advice from a woman. Talk to women with the goal of making a friend. If more happens later, great. If not, you made a friend. Absolutely do not ever do that. Don't ever do that, okay? Because if you talk to a woman like a friend and you're trying to gear yourself towards either being in a relationship or hooking up, you're setting yourself up to be mind fucked. You're setting her up to be mind fucked, and you might even miss opportunities, and you're mind fucking the whole situation. If you want to bang somebody, you want to date somebody. I'm not saying you have to say immediately like, "Hey, what's up? I like your tits. I want to come on them." I'm not saying you have to like be that forward, but if you set up somebody to just be your friend, and then you just are their friend for a long time, there's like the issue is that you just don't want to do that. It's just not a good idea. You're setting everybody up for disappointment, I think.
Seeing that happen.
But my understanding is the majority of women still expect the man to take the initiative.
Absolutely.
And this is one of the most frightening stats I've seen. According to Pew, more than 50% of men between the ages of 18 and 24 have never asked a woman out in person. And I just find that so just upsetting and rattling, because that means they're either not asking people out or they're asking them out online where, quite frankly, they can't demonstrate any sense of excellence. And I think the beautiful thing about human sexuality is sometimes you don't even know why you're attracted to someone. You like the way they smell.
This is one of the reasons why I think online dating apps are so bad and why trying to select on criteria is so bad, is because there's a whole class of people or a whole type of person that you could end up attracted to because of a variety of things that you don't fully understand. This goes for men and women. And the idea of being on an app where you can select like 52 different checkboxes to figure out like the perfect person. Like there might be a guy who's 5'6" that you would really like, or there might be a girl who's chubby, or there might be a person who's black or Asian or white or whatever, or you really don't know until you're out meeting people to get a better feel for it.
Out there funny. Mm-hmm. And that happens in person. But we need more third spaces, more places people can meet. And also, I actually think it would be helpful to have in the senior year of high school a class called Adulting, where amongst other things you teach them about the interest rate on a credit card. Little things. Yeah. My kid can do integers and he doesn't understand the interest rate on his credit card. And also, quite frankly, I think young men need guidance around how to express romantic interest while making the other person feel safe.
That's safety.
And also that if you express romantic interest and ask someone out for coffee and they say no,
then you leave.
You're both going to be fine.
Oh, that too, yeah.
You haven't committed a crime against humanity. As long as you're respectful and you don't make the person feel uncomfortable. But men aren't even asking women out.
Everything you're saying is what I'm seeing. So I was talking to this incredible 16-year-old girl who built this.
I do think it's a bit of a, obviously we live in a crazy Me Too world. But I do think it's a bit of a cope for to say oh, the reason why men aren't asking women out is because they're worried about blah, blah. No, it's because of a whole bunch of things related to being socialized with, even being able to talk to women. That's just like a rando excuse. Like you talk to some dude who's been in his home playing League of Legends for 15 years straight, and this guy hasn't seen the sunlight in a decade, and you're like, why don't you go out and talk to a woman? And he's like, I'm worried I'll get Me Too'd, I think. I was like, really, bro? I don't even know if you can get close enough to a girl for her to accuse you of anything. Like, let's get to the point. Like, you getting Me Too'd would probably be an improvement, okay, from your current social situation. So let's go out and like talk to people and learn some social skills, and we'll go from there.
This AI chatbot called Ask L, and she's taken all the relationship science research that she's seen, and she's trained this chatbot, and she's trying to help teens get safe and empowered dating advice. And I asked her, what is the #1 question that you're getting? And it's how to ask someone out. And so I think people are really struggling. It's not that teens in all of human history had the secret, it's that they were willing to do it and fail.
Not that they were willing to do it and fail, but I think they were forced to do it. Like, you just had to. God, the internet is so fucking bad. Like, I'm such a fucking nerd. If you saw pictures of me in high school, they're probably on my Facebook. Like, I'm such a fucking nerd. And I was a nerd in high school too. Like, I played video games. I was a hardcore Stark runner, all this shit. Despite that, like, every Friday, Saturday, I was always going out to like friends' houses where there were guys and girls all the time. Like, I had a social life. I went to an all boys high school, but I never missed a school dance. I almost always had a date to the dance. I was always dating through high school, basically, from my sophomore year onwards. I was always going to Friday, Saturday hangouts with people, at guys' houses, at girls' houses, whatever. Because, like, if you wanted to see and hang out with people, you had to do that. You just had to. There was no option to just be only online and like, oh, let's get the boys together and just play video games the entire time and not go anywhere. Like, no, you want to see your friends in real life and you want to hang out and do things. And I feel like but you weren't competing with the same online world back then. It was just so different. Like, I think if I was growing up in today's world, I don't know if I would ever have fucking gone out. I think I might have just stayed home the entire time and just like played video games or something. It feels different. I don't know.
And now we're just not seeing that. And so I think that we have glossed over the pandemic. It was this really traumatic time, really scary.
The pandemic might have exacerbated things a little bit, but like, these were issues that were massively apparent way before the pandemic, right?
Stuff happened and we don't want to talk about it. But people that came of age during the pandemic, their social skills are worse. They missed out on critical moments of becoming a human. And we are seeing that in the workplace. All of these things about Gen Z, Gen Alpha, that came from something. It came from parenting. It came from digital addiction. It came from the pandemic and online learning. And I think that if you do not have the social skills to approach someone and ask them out, there just will be literally fewer couples.
I want to throw a Molotov cocktail into this and something that's controversial I've gotten pushback on. I think one of the enemies of mating is that there's too little drinking. If you look at millennials, they spend $30 billion on alcohol. Gen Z, it's crashed to $2 billion. Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman have declared war on drinking. I think young people need to drink more, go out and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off.
The thing about drinking is that, one, you're hopefully in a social environment. You're not going out and drinking on your own. So number one, you're already in a social environment, which helps. And number two, I think drinking, it just helps you get out of your head, I think. A lot of people are just in their head too much. And I don't feel like other substances help you as much. Like, I don't think I really need to loosen up so I can have some fun with this guy. I'm going to smoke some weed. Like, I don't know if that ever helps or if anybody's ever uttered that sentence before. Maybe for some people it helps, but I feel like you're drinking just like, there's a reason why they call it a social lubricant. It just helps you get out of your head a little bit.
I don't see drunkenness, I see togetherness. And I don't know how it was for you in your relationship, but I think of the majority of great friendships I have and the romantic opportunities I've had, not always, but often alcohol played a role. And I worry that with a lack of going out, being out of the house, and also a lack of drinking, that we've taken away a social lubricant that breaks down some of the walls and some of the initial awkwardness and entry into a potential romantic relationship.
I think some of the increase in being sober curious comes from interest in being healthy. So we hear from Gen Z, I don't want to have anxiety the next day. They are much less likely.
And it's expensive.
Yeah, they are much less likely to millennials.
Okay, that's true. The one argument against alcohol, if you go out, you need to save money for it, you need a pregame. Okay, pregame like crazy. Or does anybody ever like sneak? Can you sneak your own alcohol and like spike drinks? Just get like virgin drinks or order a Coke or something? Because cocktails are way too expensive. What the fuck?
To feel like there's a 2-drink minimum for dates. But in general, we're seeing less risk-taking behavior from Gen Z. They are getting their licenses far later, if at all. They are losing their virginity much later, if at all. And so I feel like there's this rise of...
Drinking is also an excuse to do something and to just be a moron. I feel like part of the fun of being drunk is that I'm allowed to be an idiot. Who the fuck cares? I'm goofy as fuck. I'm drunk, bitch. That is true. One of the great... being drunk, I think, is a bit like currency. And that like we all like why is money worth anything? Well, money is worth something because I say it's worth something, and we all agree that it's worth something. And in the future, if I go to the butcher to get some meat, he's going to give me meat based on the assumption that everyone else is going to continue to pretend that like this paper dollars is actually worth something, right? Like we all kind of collectively buy into that. We have to for fiat currency to work, right? And alcohol is a bit like that. A number of relationships or hookups or bad decisions like have started with the whole line of like, hey, I'm drunk, so, but like you're never actually so drunk that you're like, I have no clue what I'm doing right now. Or you could be if you're getting fucked up hardcore. But I think it's like this 50-50. It's like this agreement you're making with yourself where you're like, okay, there's a person I wanted to talk to or a thing that I wanted to do. And I feel like my inhibitions are a little bit looser, and me and this other person can collectively kind of buy into this fiction of, hey, I'm wasted right now. I think you're hot. I want to chat with you, blah, blah, blah. And everybody kind of like goes along with it, you know?
Or there's this decrease in risk-taking behavior, which in some ways is great. You know, fewer kids dying in car crashes and people being
Less
responsible.
teen pregnancy.
But I just feel like people are missing out on the experience to make mistakes as a young person. And I think when I think back to my college experience, if there had been cameras that have high quality video on them at all times, I would have lived a very different college experience.
Yeah, this is true as well. It feels different when everything is like permanent and immortalized forever, and everybody's posting about everything on every fucking social media app, and I don't know. I don't like that. I think the feeling is weird. Not good.
I am so grateful that Instagram was not there when I was in college. And so if
The
you
inability to like unplug from aspects of social life, I can't even begin to imagine what that feels like to a younger person. Like if I didn't want to engage with anybody socially, then I mean, where are people doing this on? Some people would do AOL Instant Messenger and then like kind of on Facebook. Like that was it. There wasn't this expectation that you were on every single app, you know, posting pictures and stories and communicating with people like fucking constantly. Like texting was just starting to become a thing. Like, ooh, that just seems like a really shitty feeling. I don't like that.
you live in a surveillance culture where at any moment somebody is snapping the room and they could see what you're doing, you're going to take fewer risks. And I just feel like there's this entire culture of people being very safe, and part of dating, part of mating is making mistakes, taking risks, and failing.
So what do we do about it, Logan? Scott gave a really good sort of advice for the young man or the young person who's trying to increase their mating value, their dating value. What advice would you give to a young man about how to be attractive? Because there's going to be a lot of young men listening right now. I imagine from the stats.
First of all, I love
70%.
what Scott said in terms of his advice, and I feel like it's one of those things where
This is a really hard conversation to have too, because women are fucking annoying as fuck. I'm sympathetic towards women, and oftentimes I'm the one providing the counter to this because I'm on Red Pill Show, or I was on Red Pill Shows and arguing with guys. I'm sympathetic towards the idea that women are like, listen, it's not my job to train, okay, the men of the future or whatever. If guys are retarded on this shit, that's on them. It's not my job to train. It's like, to some extent, that might be true. However, men are expected to be respectful and considerate of women in a billion different ways. And the reality is that a lot of women are insanely socially fucking autistic, but they can get away with it because a lot of the people around them are trying to fuck them, okay? And women will never get called out on being fucking emotionally retarded sometimes or being autistic as fuck sometimes. I don't know, like there are just different considerations that some people have to make, and it's like, if we want the world to be better, we all kind of have to work at it. And that means sometimes it might be like women doing a little bit of emotional labor for men or helping out in some regard. And it might mean men obviously being considerate of certain things as well, but
secret to happiness, or the secret to success, is simple but hard. So it's not like there's infinite things you need to do. It's actually quite a simple plan, but it's quite hard to execute on it. A few things that I would add. So one is, I have this friend, Sam Parr. He started The Hustle. He started the podcast My First Million. One thing that he did to make himself more attractive as a mate was he would develop these passions and really talk about them on dates, because he found that women were really drawn to the fact that he was pursuing other activities. So he got really into denim, and he would talk about these denim meets that he would go to, and he found that women were really drawn to that. He's very into the growth mindset and working on himself. He felt like that was something that women were so drawn to, how he was growing. Because if you think about the projections, well, when he met my friend Sarah, he wasn't making any money. She was making a lot more than him. But she could see that he had a great path ahead of him because he was constantly working and improving himself.
What's interesting, being emotionally intelligent and not being social autistic, are these not intrinsically opposing? No, I mean, people can be intelligent in some ways and retarded in other ways. I think women are very emotionally sensitive when it comes to dealing with other women and when it comes to like resolving conflict and expressing emotions and whatnot. But I think sometimes, partially because men shield their emotions from women a lot, so it might be harder for them to understand. And a man will never, ever, ever tell you if you've upset him, okay? Because in some ways, a man telling you, why does this happen? Sometimes women won't tell you when they're upset, but you know when they're upset. But I feel like sometimes a woman can say a thing that can like just completely cut a guy down, but he'll try not to give any indication of it, because to give an indication of it is to kind of sort of make the thing true. But for some reason, I'm trying to think of why women. I don't know why women do this. They're just fucking autistic. I mean, guys do it sometimes too. Like a thing I can think of for like an example of this has to do with comparisons. If you ever think about comparing anybody ever, it's just don't ever do it ever. It's just never a good idea ever. Don't ever. Even if you think you're being smart, comparing your partner to somebody else is like talking to the police. When you think you're successfully navigating something, you're just laying future traps for yourself. That's always what you're doing. So there might be some girl you dated or some girl you see and your girlfriend sees you checking her out or whatever, and you're like, oh, fuck, she saw me, whatever. And you might be thinking like, oh yeah, like she's kind of cute, but like you have way better tits. I'm a big boob guy and I love your boobs. Like, fuck that chick or whatever. And you might think that you've like won some huge battle, but then like tomorrow, two girls show up and they're big booby bitches. And now your girlfriend's looking at you and you're like, oh shit, I fucked myself. This chick's gonna look at every woman with a bigger cup for the rest of her fucking life, okay? Like a fucking cheetah. I fucked myself. And women will also just do like autistically stupid shit. Or I think sometimes women think that if they say a thing, it's enough, but it's not. Like a woman will say some shit. A woman will be with a guy who's like, say a guy who's self-conscious about his height, who's 5'7", 5'8", and a woman will say some shit like, oh, like I was with this one dude, and he was like 6'4", and I dated this tall guy, and it was like really cool. Oh, but I'm glad I'm with you now. Or guys can say the same thing to a woman. They'll be like, oh, I dated this one girl, and she was like a freak or whatever, but I'm glad I'm with you now, and it's cool. And people will say things like that, like, oh no, it's cool, I prefer like you now. Your partner will never, ever, 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 ever hear that. I see men and women do this, and it's like, why would you ever say something so fucking autistic to your partner? Like, even if you say you don't care, even if you genuinely don't care, you're like planting the worst ideas ever in your partner's mind. And the next time you guys fight or there's some moment of insecurity, like this shit is always, don't ever compare ever. Don't ever do it. It's always a trap. Okay? Just don't ever do it.
The other thing I would tell men is, through my research, I found that men think, I need to be perfect. I need to be 6 feet tall. Look, women
will compare with exes all the time. Yeah, men do it too, though. Just don't tell your partner you're doing it, okay?
And improving himself. The other thing I would tell men is, through my research, I found that men think, I need to be perfect. I need to be 6 feet tall. Look, women are not expecting you to fly them to the moon. They want effort. Remember the name of their best friend. Text them when they had a hard meeting and say, how did it go? Plan a thoughtful date. And so I think that you have men over here saying, if I'm not 6 feet tall, I don't have a chance, so why participate anyway? And then you have women saying, in some ways, I just want you to be an effortful, nice person, and I'm not even getting that. And so I think that for men, they can actually get much farther than they think and be better than 90% of men by doing some of these bare minimum things that other men aren't doing. So I have this question that I ask in my book, which is when you're deciding if you should break up with someone. If your partner were a piece of clothing in your closet, what would they be?
Is it my clothes or her clothes? My
Your
clothes. Oh, okay.
And it really has to be gut reaction. So Scott, if you thought of one, I want to hear it.
I thought of like a black silk shirt.
Jeez.
And that's probably because that's where we spend quality time together, is when I'm wearing a black silk shirt. Special occasions, date night, restaurant, make an effort.
Do you feel good in it?
Yeah, of course, I feel my best in it. Yeah.
And do you have one for your wife?
Brunello Cucinelli cashmere V-neck sweater makes me look fantastic,
Jesus.
makes me better, and is beautiful.
Yes. And mine for my husband would be this awesome orange robe that I have that represents being at home. I love the orange color that's really bright, and it represents our family time. So I've asked this question to.
I feel shamed. I feel like mine was so superficial.
No, yours was great.
Cashmere
No,
V-neck
no, no. I think your answer.
family orange. I feel so shamed.
No. I think your answer is wonderful. And I actually, in general,
You
find
did fuck up. No, I'm just...
that outerwear answers are very strong because it means that you feel warm around them. It's you at your best.
I
This
just
is your
feel
favorite.
fucking fabulous. I don't know if I feel warm.
That's all that matters. Your answer was great. The answers that worry me are something like a wool sweater that feels good, but then it's itchy, so I take it off. The ratty shirt that I wear to the gym. These are real answers I've gotten. Point is, for years I've been asking people this question. Well, now I want to ask people the question of, if you were a piece of clothing in your closet, what would you be? And I feel like we spend so much time saying, I'm looking for this in a partner. This is the checklist. Well, look in the mirror. Do you have those traits? And so for somebody who says, I'm a ratty sweatshirt and it's not the thing that I would choose to wear, well, then work on yourself. And so I feel like there's a lot of feelings of, I'm going to relation shop. I'm going to look for a partner the way I look for Bluetooth headphones. Well, a lot of that is about breaking people down into these parts. And I feel like we should spend less time thinking about the checklist for a partner and more time thinking about, who am I, and am I somebody who would be chosen?
We've talked a lot about how young men are struggling. Which demographic of women do you find struggle the most as it relates to mating and dating?
So I work with a lot of very successful women, and that's also because I'm expensive to work with, and that's who my clients are. But I have a newsletter where I hear from 85,000 people. And so what I'm hearing is that a lot of women are saying men are intimidated by the amount of money that I make. They say that they're not going to be, but the more successful I become, the more threatened they are. I'm just talking to tons of women, personal friends. I feel like at my house, on one side of me and then two sides over, are women who are having babies, they call it like single mother by choice, where they literally were just like, I can't find a man and I want to become a mom, so I'm going to do it by myself. Yeah. And so I feel like there are just all these great women who are saying, Logan, I'm following your advice. I'm putting myself out there. I do all these things, but they're just not finding partners.
Do you find that the more successful a woman becomes, the more difficult it becomes for her to find a man that will not feel emasculated by her success?
I feel like, I wonder if this goes in both ways. I feel like it would intuitively. That like the more successful you become for anybody, especially if you start to hit like these upper echelons, that it's harder to find a partner. But
don't think that there's an exact correlation, because it really depends who the guy is. There are guys out there who are like, let's be a power couple. But I feel like there are women who just feel like there is not enough good guys for them. And I'm curious what you think about this, but I live in the Bay Area. I'm seeing so much polyamory. And I think polyamory is interesting. I'm pro polyamory. I like the fact that people are thinking about relationship structures in a new way. 50%
she's a rationalist. Be careful.
of marriages end in divorce. Obviously, our one size fits all approach to marriage isn't working. But I'm also wondering, well, let me tell you this story. I went to this dating event, and the dating event had 5 single women who were great, and their friends were hyping them up. And then there was 2 guys, and they were both polyamorous. And so I wonder, if you're a guy who feels like there's not that many good guys, why should I have to choose? I feel like that's a trend that I'm worried about.
Portia polygamy. If it's never been better to be a very attractive male, but you have so much opportunity, it does not incent good behavior or long-term relationships.
Yeah, I was gonna say it depends on what you're looking for.
And
like if you want to just smash, and this is an argument that I even researched this for my debate with Rollo and Mike Sartain. If you want to bang a lot and you're a guy, there's one thing that you can do that is correlated or causally related probably with banging a lot, and that's wanting to bang a lot. If you're a guy that explicitly goes out looking for sex, it's a higher predictive thing than being tall, than being rich, than being whatever. Like men who make a lot of money on average, their body count is like 1 or whatever higher than men that are middle class and whatever. Like it's not that, the differences aren't that big. Same thing with like the 5, 6 and below guys, their body count difference is like 2 different than guys who are like 6'2" and above or whatever. It's if people want to go out and fuck all the time, they'll do it. Like not to be down on incels or whatever the fuck women too, okay? Fuck everybody. But like if you there's a lot of losers in the real world okay, that are fucking having kids and shit all the time. And it's not because they've tricked everybody into thinking they're Chad Thundercock and they've done it. It's just because they want to fuck. And that's it. And they go out and they look for pussy, they find it and they do it. Like, you know.
Work with these guys and you might think that they're the happiest people in the world. They are having sex. They are getting a lot of attention, but they're suffering from decision paralysis. And these are some of the guys that hit 40, 42, and they haven't gotten married. They don't have kids. And they sort of are like, why would I ever settle down if I don't have to, or I'm going to wait as long as possible? But they don't understand the opportunity cost, which is building a life with someone, having kids every year.
Well, I would say you would actually turn that question then back to the woman, because like I said before, I think men are having a big problem figuring out like what's the value proposition for being in a relationship with a woman, or I'm sorry, what's the woman's value or what's the man's value proposition for the woman to date him, right? And it can't just be jobs anymore because women are looking for more than just, money because they can work. However, if you're a guy and you can bang a lot of chicks and you're not trying to like start a family or anything, like why get married or why settle down with one person or why, why wouldn't you just do? I mean, that's kind of like my life, right? Like why? Like, I don't really want to have another kid. Like, why would I say I'm going to monogamously pair off with one person for the rest of my life if I'm not looking to start a family or whatever? I don't know. What's the value for that? I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that either, obviously. But I mean, I guess if you're a guy and you're like, you live this lifestyle and you're like stressed about not having a kid, then obviously there is an issue there. But
year that you wait to have kids is a year that your kids will be alive without you. And so I really feel like these people in the top percentage, yes, they're having a much easier time, but they also have problems because they're having decision paralysis and they're not settling down.
But I would just
like just not settling down isn't necessarily decision paralysis. It could just be they just don't want to, right? Which if you don't want to have a family is probably fair, I would imagine.
The reality though on the ground is that if you're a high status male, you think age is on your side.
And it is.
And because the reality is the math is just unfair to women.
It is.
Because if you're a 30-year-old male making really good money and it, relative, like just not unattractive, at 40, you're going to be even sexier. Your sexual currency goes up.
I do think that there's a point where it starts to go down, and I've seen that with my coaching clients, and part of that is just how the dating apps work, that if you are an attractive woman and you set your age maximum at 40, I do see that those men see diminishing returns after.
Yeah, people will make this thing out to be more than it actually is. The reality is there's a certain type of girl that's willing to be, like 22 and date a guy in his like even 30s, 40s, 50s. Like this is not the norm, and you're probably not selecting for in general like the healthiest. These are just not. Yeah, this is not the norm, and I don't think it ever will be.
After that age,
well, especially if they haven't ever been in a long-term relationship.
Right, then that is seen as a clear red flag.
If you're looking to take the next step in your tech career, you'll want to hear about our sponsor, Intuit.
I do.
I've always believed that if you want to do your best work,
yeah,
you have to put yourself in the right environment. You want to work with the best. You want to work with the best technologists who are leading innovation with data and AI. And this is what you can expect at Intuit. They're growing their tech careers, building an AI-driven expert platform that connects people to all the money they deserve. The cutting-edge tech they are developing in products like TurboTax, Credit Karma, QuickBooks, and MailChimp are helping around 100 million customers and businesses put more money in their pockets. Having a mission-driven culture is something I really align with because it's all about solving complex customer problems with rapid experimentation to move faster. Quite similar to the culture I want to foster at my companies. If this sounds like you and you want to grow your tech career working alongside the best, check out intuit.com/careers. They also offer hybrid work and a very inclusive culture with offices in Atlanta, New York, San Diego, the Bay Area, Toronto, and around the world. Head over to intuit/careers to explore their opportunities. No matter where I am in the world, it seems like everyone is drinking matcha. And there's a good chance that that matcha you're drinking is made by a company that I've invested more than 7 figures in, who are a sponsor of this podcast called Perfect TED. Because they're the brand used globally by cafes like Blank Street Coffee and Joe and the Juice and many, many more. Not only can you get Perfect TED matcha in cafes, but you can now also make it at home. much cheaper. In seconds, using our flavored matcha powders that I have here in front of me. Perfect TED matcha is ceremonial grade and sourced from Japan. It is smooth, it is naturally sweet, not like those bitter grassy matchas that I tried before Perfect TED. And if you are one of those people that have told yourself you don't like matcha, it's probably because you haven't tried our Perfect TED matcha. And you can find Perfect TED matcha in the UK in Tesco, Sainsbury's, Holland and Barrett, and in Waitrose, or Albert Heijn if you're in the Netherlands, and on Amazon in the USA, or get the full range online at perfectted.com, where you can get 40% off your first order with code Stephen40. What role does feminism and the rise of feminism play in all of this? Because I've had people on my podcast.
Yeah.
I think actually our last episode we published was a lady who's a child psychologist. She's been that way for 3 decades. And she came on and said that the feminist movement has let men and women down in some ways. There's been great upsides, but there's also been a cost. And one of the things she was really big on, which I thought would be extremely controversial, it turns out it wasn't in the comment section, is that she believes women should be there for the first 2 years of a child's life. And I was like, I questioned her on that. I was like, and then I looked at the stats and I looked at the research, and she basically makes the case that because the mother is producing certain hormones, so I searched and it was true, we fact checked that episode, and then beyond there, the man, the father, brings out another set of hormones in the young child, which are about play and adventure and all these kinds of things. So she makes the case that we've kind of lied to women, and we've told them that they can have it all. They can have an incredible career. They can also be incredible mothers. And she says that in her office, she often sees mothers coming in saying that they're 39 years old, they're struggling, they're trying to do IVF, they feel like they were lied to, throwing all of that out there.
I'm going to
This is, unless maybe the future ends up disagreeing with me, this is a massive cope that needs to die as soon as possible. I don't know if it's men telling themselves this cope or if it's women who are happy in their lives telling themselves this cope, but this idea that there are all of these single women who are, you know, working hard and traveling through their 20s and 30s and banging random dudes and like having fun and chilling, who are like, oh God, I'm 35 and I wish I would have spent my whole life instead taking care of like a 2-year-old. And now I would like, I don't think this is borne out anywhere in any sort of data. I think this is like the most massive cope in the world. And the idea behind this cope is that like, if we can just convince women that they're going to be miserable, then they're going to change their mind. They're going to finally go back to the lifestyles we want to have. I don't know. Maybe there will be some data showing this, or maybe there is. I just haven't seen it yet. But I don't think. I'm sure there are some people that regret their lifestyle. I'm sure it happens with men and women. But this idea that there's this huge group of women who, the modern woman is like horrified at the potential life that she lost. I don't think it's true.
quote Scott to Scott, which is, you can have it all, just not at the same time.
Yeah, I don't. We can talk about what is the best hormone balance and brings out the best in kids, and then there's the real world. And my partner was working at Goldman Sachs with 2 babies and getting up at 5 a.m, and it was hell for her. And at the same time, I was struggling with trying to get economic traction because my whole identity as a man, I'm not proud of this, has been defined by money.
So is mine. I don't think men say this enough. Like, yeah, of course. I thought this was really weird because we're in Austin right now, and my team put me up in a hotel, and it's just like a normal hotel. I'm like, so I don't give a fuck. My girlfriend comes to town tonight. Immediately, my brain goes, oh my God, we need to move into a better hotel Airbnb because my girlfriend, I've been with her for 7 years. She doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
She doesn't care about material things. She doesn't have a Louis Vuitton anything. She's a breathwork, she's a yogi, right? But there's still this part of me, even at this stage, where I'm like convinced she's not going anywhere, where I constantly think about, I need to be successful, I need to have money, I need to demonstrate strength, or she won't like me. It's so weird because it's not true. Like, objectively, I know it's not true, but it's in me.
I don't know. I think it's most.
The reason is that there's 2 things going on. Is that one, people can be very vain, but the second thing is that like money is literally a directly quantifiable way to see how much society has determined your value is. And people can try to get around that in some ways, but that's an inescapable reality of what fiat currency is, right? Money is basically a unit of exchange that says that you've done some amount of work that's made it so that you can exchange that work for, anything else in the country that you can buy. And everybody has agreed that that's what money is, and everybody agrees that's what money for. So in a way, like, money quantifies directly, I guess, how much society is deemed to be worth. So it's not surprising that people are going to, in some ways, at the end of the day, have a feeling about themselves based on, you know, their class position or how much they're worth or whatever else. Like, that's just, there's no way to overcome that. Like, even women to some extent can evaluate themselves like that. Maybe not by how much money they make, but the partner that they can get and how much money that partner can make. Like, they still, you know, round themselves out in that way.
Mostly true.
What do you mean?
I think in a capitalist society, the health care of your children, the opportunities your children have, your ability to provide, your ability to take care of your parents, unfortunately, in our society, is so tightly correlated to money
Yeah.
that I think at the end of the day, masculinity kind of comes down to provider, protector, and procreator. And I think every young man should at least start with the notion they're going to be the economic provider. And by the way, that might mean getting out of the way and being more supportive of your partner who happens to be better at the whole money thing than you. That's part of masculinity too.
Right.
But a good place to start is to assume in a capitalist society that you have a responsibility to be economically viable. And every piece of incentive in our society, I remember in the 70s when I was in grade school, our principal was a cool guy. He wore cool jackets and he had great hair and he smelled aqua velva and he drove a 240Z. You could be a high character, handsome, interesting, cool guy into karate or whatever. Now I just think it's all about the Benjamins. It's just so much, our society, democracy, your rights, your sexual attractiveness as a man. I don't care what, write me an article about how men just need to be emotionally available. Bullshit. It's so disappointing.
It's not one or the other.
About money, in my view. All the incentives telling young men, and so they go to these get-rich-quick schemes. If they can make money, they feel like losers. But what you're feeling, quite frankly, is common sense from every signal that if for some reason it doesn't work out with your mate, your selection set of mates, how interesting you are to other men, your opportunities, your rights, your democracy is going to be based on your ability to be economically powerful. It's not the way the world should be, but it is the way the world is. And what I say to young men is, there's just no getting around it. You have to be economically viable.
Would you say the same thing to women, or would you say there's no getting around it, you have to be hot?
No, I think women, unfortunately, so this is base analysis. Men get turned on with their eyes. It's more important for a woman to be aesthetically attractive than a man. Women get turned on with their ears. That's the way I would describe it. I think women, economic liberation and independence is paramount. You know, the thing that was the hardest thing in my life growing up, you know, whatever trauma I had, wasn't not having.
I think you have to be really careful. This guy's been super red-pilled. Sky Galloway has. You have to be really careful with truisms like this because you can find yourself in this like self-perpetuating cycle. If you say the only thing one gender cares about is this trait, and then you model yourself after that trait, the only people you run into are going to be people who only care about that trait. So if you're a woman and you're thinking, well, guys only care about how I look, so that's what I'm going to kind of like, I'm going to make my dating strategy revolve around that. You're only going to find guys that care about how you look. Like that's it's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Having a dad in my life, it was that me and my mom didn't have any fucking
Same thing
money.
with men. If you're a guy and your way, you know, you think like, well, women just care about the amount of money you make at the end of the day. Like, I think that's all they care about. And so the way that you like navigate the dating world is to be flashy with wealth and to try to be a show off as much as possible to demonstrate your value, whatever. You're only going to find women that are looking for those traits because every other woman's going to be turned off by what you're showing, basically.
Money. And it was humiliating for us. It was very hard on her. It was emotionally very trying on her because she felt like she was failing as a mother. So I think women making a lot of money is a collective victory of our society. It is hugely important and wonderful. We should do nothing to get in the way of that. That doesn't in any way, though, obviate the fact
Makes it harder
that
for
a
men.
man's opportunity, sexual currency, and place in our society is almost going to have an R of 1, regardless of how many subscriptions to the Atlantic or the New York Times you have, of his economic viability. And I think it's gotten worse. I don't think it's got, you used to be able to, if you were a high character, kind of cool, interesting, nice guy who was a principal at a junior high school, you had sexual currency. Now I think you can be a fucking dipshit, but if you've sold $10 million in Dogecoin, you can get laid.
I think this is absolutely not true. And when you look to communities that say stuff like this, like they're just not generally in. Like where, like, who did it? It's this guy that I fucking hate the dude, but he's almost like a neo-Nazi online now. I don't remember what his name was, but he posted that meme of like, is it Joffrey opening the book in Game of Thrones for all of the heroic exploits of the Kingsguards, and it's all the names of basically every single red pillar, and it's like unmarried, 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 no kids, unmarried, unmarried, no kids, unmarried, and it's like, oh, what's going on here, you know? Like, these people should be overwhelmed with positive relationship choices to start a family and all that, right? But they're not, right? I don't think it works this way necessarily.
And it's just getting worse because our capitalist economy is providing so many advantages solely based on money, and it sends the wrong signal. But I just tell dudes, you have to be economically viable, and some of that is just having discipline around saving money and showing that you have your act together. Maybe you don't make a lot of money, but I'm responsible. I'll be a good mate. I'll be a good partner. Maybe you're making more money than me, but I'll bring discipline. You know,
Talking about just hooking up here, no? Well, if it's just hooking up, you don't have to have any money or anything at all. You just have to be cool. What do you mean? I think for fucking, it's pretty. If a guy wants to fuck, he'll fuck. That's it. That's what it is.
know how to fix shit. I can be a good mate. But one of the things I really am worried about in America is just everything has become about the Benjamins. Character is being squeezed out by money. God, that sounded awful.
Look, I want to ask you, have you ever felt what Scott describes? Have you ever felt that your sort of sense of self-worth equates to how much money you have? Because
What's your explanation of Andrew Tate having a girlfriend post-sex crime? People will cope with the Tates on both sides. Red pillars will cope and say, oh, it's because they're wealthy and they've got all these successes and blah, blah, blah. And people on the left will cope and say, oh, it's because they're abusive and blah, blah, blah. The reality is that if you watch Andrew and you watch Tristan and you listen to them talk, and you watch, they're funny dudes. They really are. They both are. Andrew and Tristan will say shit that can make anybody in a room laugh. These guys are just insanely fucking charismatic. If you were to take 10 men and you were to give them all the wealth and all the status of Andrew and Tristan Tate and send them into a bar, and you were to give Andrew and Tristan like a normal fucking set of like an Adidas track pants outfit and say, you can't bring up money a single time, like Andrew and Tristan, I don't know about Andrew, probably, but Andrew and definitely Tristan, they will clean the fuck up every single time. They will clean up. Look at John Zerka as a fucking loser in every single sense of the word. And he is tall and handsome, and that helps, but bro, he's so like naturally charismatic and funny and effeminate when he needs to be. Like these people just clean up because they're insanely charismatic. It doesn't matter how much status or success or wealth they have.
felt that.
I don't think I as much have money equals identity and self-worth, but I do think for many people, there's a sense that money equals security.
What am I
And
building?
So we're all
I don't know what the
chasing
fuck
that
I'm here
dollar,
for.
which is security.
Okay, hold
But
on.
like
But I think for men, it's much stronger. I don't relate
Spent
to
all
what
day
you're
on this
talking
fucking
about.
planet for no reason.
Yeah. So this is, I've never actually asked a woman
Yeah.
this before, but it's the number one topic of conversation in my group
Yeah.
chat with my boys is
My boys.
how much are we working Saturday and Sunday to make more money, make ourselves more successful? And then one of my friends, who's not in my group chat, but one of my extended friends went through financial hardship.
Not in the group chat.
And he's in the lead up to starting a family, etc. And he went through a moment where he was going to be declared bankrupt, and he was inconsolably depressed. His partner was fine. She was kind of like, we'll get through this. But he actually said to me, he goes, I've never felt more worthless. And that's something that I've heard echoed by many men who go through sort of economic, financial roller coasters. And
That was actually one of the stats in that report, the Lost Boys report. Richard Reeves talks about this. I think that's actually where it comes from. So Richard Reeves says that the number one cause of death for young men under 15 is suicide, and that men in general, the things that they describe in their notes when they commit suicide are these words, worthless and useless. And so if men feel like their identity and their value and their worth comes from money, when they don't have money or they can't be a provider and they're sort of on the edge of society, then they're literally opting out, sometimes with their lives.
Opting out.
Okay, I want to take the metaphorical iPad and ask you guys some questions, because I feel like I've kind of said what I want to say about this topic, but I'm sure there are just millions of people that look up to both of you as symbols of masculinity. Scott, this is true, right? Moms talk to you all the time and say, how can I help my son? And so there's things that I want to know, because this topic is the thing I'm most passionate about. I want to spend the next 5 years really helping with this supply problem and the mating gap, but I don't know that men will listen to me. but they will listen to you. So I want to learn from you. So if you could teach a dating boot camp to all guys and even talk about what you would have them unlearn, what are some of those messages?
I would, a dating boot camp.
Yeah. Or being a human boot camp. Let's just
We
extend
would have module 1, comedy.
it. Ooh.
Do you think Scott gets a sick fucking pump in between shots or before the podcast? What do you think? Look at this guy. I bet he brings like a pull-up bar with him. It's like, I gotta go to the bathroom, 1 second. You can hear him in the bathroom.
Because the only
I
thing
like
that got me
that.
laid when I was broke was I was like slightly funny
Funny.
sometimes.
Yeah,
So, like,
great.
I could be
100%.
broken funny
Okay,
and
this
I'd
could
have
be
like some
improv.
sex,
This could
yeah.
be just this. Yeah, keep going.
Something around confidence, which is just standing. I noticed that posture correlates to dating success. So I'd have men learn to stand up straight and to control their posture and take up more space. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, which is don't be shriveled. So like standing up straight, which is obviously one of the things that going to the gym does. It kind of pulls you out a little bit as well. Typical, but going out of fashion, male manners. Open up the door. I still open up the door for my girlfriend every single day, even though apparently they went through a phase where that was seen as like not okay to do. But I've always taken great pride in it. And funnily enough, opening up the door for my partner makes me feel good. I'm like doing it for selfish reasons. It makes me feel like a man. It makes me feel strong. Also, like when a bus comes, I love the fact that I put my hand across my girlfriend. That for me makes me feel like a man. I love that when we cross a road, I'm the one that's looking out. I love that I stand on the roadside of the pavement, etc. So
There might be differences in different dating markets, so I don't take everything I say with a grain of salt, I guess. But like, I've never in my life found somebody, regardless of political persuasion, who doesn't to some extent like or enjoy or get some sort of like fulfillment out of performing our like default gender roles. I've found that almost every single person I've ever met enjoys that to some extent. That a man performing masculinity, a woman performing femininity, that almost everybody enjoys doing this, regardless of their political persuasion.
I teach men these kind of behaviors and definitely going to the gym. And then, as Scott said, like entrepreneurship or making some money, that would be central to my boot camp. I'll give you one more. It would be conflict resolution. And this goes to like the emotional empathy point. One thing that I struggle with,
Fuck, how do I
or at
empty
least I
these
struggled
faster?
with
The
until
fuck?
my girlfriend coached me. And I did this podcast so many times that I learned some lessons, is just how to deal with conflict when the sparring partner is a woman. Because men in conflict, we have a certain way typically, but learning the skill of hearing and understanding your partner, and which is very difficult. And like, listen, this might just be me. I find it incredibly difficult to sit and to listen to my partner for 90 minutes when she tells me indirectly all the things I did wrong. I've had to learn the skill of doing that.
Wait, well, hold on.
Which is very difficult. And like, listen, this might just be me. I find it incredibly difficult to sit and to listen to my partner for 90 minutes when she tells me indirectly all the things I did wrong. I've had to learn the skill of doing that.
Fuck that.
And I sat here with someone who's a psychologist and said, they said to me, if you're a man, you have to learn the skill of sitting down for 90 minutes a week.
Bullshit.
And letting your partner tell you everything that they're feeling and going through. With my
that.
boys, we don't do that.
Yeah.
When we go on holiday, it is total silence. We're eating fucking Pringles and watching the game. But when I'm with my partner, and I'm sure when she's with her friends, it's talking. So I've developed the skill now of just like sitting and listening. And then sometimes I take notes. And then sometimes I repeat back to her what she just said to me. And this is totally alien to me. And it hurts when I do it. It like hurts. And I find it so uncomfortable. Like I find it really, really uncomfortable to do that.
Even though this is something you spend hours
Yeah.
a week doing for your
100%.
job.
It's so unnatural to me.
But you've worked on it.
I've worked on it, yeah. I did it like 3 days ago. My girlfriend said, I was traveling around the world.
Yeah.
We were in, I don't even know what country we were in. She goes, I've got some things I want to talk about. Can we put some time in the calendar? Do you have 60 minutes? I've got off stage in Sweden. I put in 60 minutes into my calendar. She video calls me and she talks to me for about 45 minutes. I don't have anything to say. I'm so tired. And I just sit there and listen.
Holy
and in between the
shit.
lines, it's like things I could do better. She's not blaming me or anything, but it's hard for me.
Fuck that.
My boys would never do that.
That's toxic.
Our friendship isn't contingent on those things. So that's what I would say.
I love that.
Like, I don't know if that you relate to that, but
I think about this a lot with my boys, and I think kind of the three legs of the stool are provider. I'm probably over focused on the economics. That doesn't necessarily mean making a lot of money, but at least being disciplined and responsible about it. Developing skills, certification, having a plan. right? Don't be the guy ordering a bottle of Grey Goose at 2 a.m. Like, I'm going home because I got to get up. I have a plan, and I have a vision for how I'm going to be a good provider, a protector, good manners. Your default system is protection. You constantly speak well of people behind their backs. You hear someone being critical of someone.
I don't know why people have developed this reflex. I don't think you ever look good shitting on people. I don't know why insecure people develop that reflex where when they're not in somebody's presence and with somebody else, they think that if they shit on another person, it makes them look better. I think it almost always makes you look bad. If you're the kind of person to speak kindly or highly of other people when those other people aren't around, I think that almost always makes you look better. I don't know where that reflex was developed from.
Else, your inclination is to defend them. You don't demonize special interest groups. Your default setting, if somebody needs help anywhere or is being threatened, it's so heartbreaking to me that women feel unsafe when they see men. When they see a group of men coming down the street, surveys show women are inclined to cross the street. And it just feels like from an early age, men need to be taught, anyone smaller, anyone more vulnerable than you, anyone in a special interest group, your default is protection. That's what men do. Think about masculinity, a soldier, a cop, a fireman. What do? At the end of the day, they protect. That is your default operating system as a move to protection. And then procreator. I think you should want to have sex. I think you should be willing to take risks. I tell my boy.
That's a risky couplings of advice there.
I think you should want to have sex. I think you should be willing to take risks.
Based.
I tell my boys, I did this for a while, they can't get back in the house unless they talk to a stranger. And my oldest, no problem. Hey, what's going on? My youngest, not as easy. Just go up and pet their dog. I think there are so many men out there that have no willingness or ability to open, to just say hi. Where are you from? To just open and to want a romantic relationship is a wonderful thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Modulate your porn. Decide.
I'm gonna jerk off to Asian
Ask
stuff
yourself,
today.
would you want to have sex with you? Get strong, get fit, get your act together, smell nice, groom. If you can't dress
Stepsister
well, find
incest.
someone who can dress you, and initiate contact and want to have a relationship with someone. That's a wonderful thing. That mojo is the most purposeful, wonderful thing in my life, is that I'm raising two patriotic, decent men. And it started with me really wanting to have sex with this woman I saw at the pool at the Raleigh Hotel, right? And I know that sounds crass. It's like, I looked at her and thought, I am really attracted to this woman, so I'm going to take a risk. In the middle of the day, without the benefit of alcohol, I'm going to walk up and introduce myself to her and another guy and a woman she was with. Hey, where are you guys from? And then 18 months later, our first son was born, middle name Raleigh, after the hotel. Take risks. Want to have mating opportunities. You're a provider. Your default system is a protector. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a procreator.
I love everything you said.
But-
And then one thing was going through my head as you said it was, it feels really sad that in this moment in time, we have to tell people to become procreators. Don't you feel like there's something sick in our society if that has to be taught? Evolutionarily, all of our software is towards procreation. Like, that is how we are wired. Yet people are so sick from the food that they eat, from all the medications that people are on, from all the
I feel like that got a little bit weird, but okay.
pornography, from all the technology, that you literally have to teach your sons the importance of procreation. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm really freaked out by all of this stuff, because we are at a point in society where in South Korea, of 100 people of childbearing age, they are going to produce 12 grandchildren based on a 0.7 birth rate. And the fact that you talk about the P of procreation, like, I'm so worried about our society.
It's 60% of 30-year-olds 40 years ago used to have a kid. Now it's 27%.
Damn. Damn.
So when I was on the plane on the way here, I told this woman who was sitting next to me what I was going to be talking about. And her gut reaction was, oh, why do we have to worry about that? Women are doing better than men. Like, great, let us do that for the first time in history. Like, her gut reaction was, why is this a problem? Then I started telling her these stats around lowest marriage rate, we're approaching the lowest marriage rate in US history. The birth rate has gone down 20% in 20 years. And she didn't know these numbers. And I feel like people are afraid to talk about this topic because they think it's a zero-sum game
Yep.
where when men lose,
Crazy how that
women
comes up
win,
so
and
much,
vice
the
versa.
zero-sum game
But right now,
bullshit.
we're all losing.
There's huge economic impact too, because it used to be 12 people working age to support every senior. Now it's 3 to 1. If we don't have kids, we're going to go into economic decline.
Yeah, South Korea is replacing its nursery schools with its nursing homes. Like, they are the anti-example for us, and I think people need to be paying attention.
By 2050, about
What do you mean by that? What? That everybody views everything as a zero-sum game in society now. Everybody feels like if somebody's winning, it must mean they're losing. And so everybody wants to fuck everybody over.
40% of the population will be senior citizens, and the labor force could have halved within the next 40 years. The Bank of Korea warns that if current trends persist, the Korean economy could begin contracting in 10 years' time. And this presents a national service risk as the country relies on its conscripted military. And this will fall by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people by 2025. It'll half, oh my gosh, could fall from 250,000 troops to 125,000 troops. Politics is the last thing I wanted to talk about, and how this sort of intertwines with everything we've talked about today. Obviously, Trump is now in power, and as we saw in the data, and it was touched on earlier on, young men have become more right-leaning and more conservative than ever before. The left hasn't necessarily offered the best vision of masculinity to young men, as something Scott's talked about previously. I was wondering, I think this morning in the hotel, I was like, how is the left going to get men back? Is that possible? Because the vision of masculinity, this is something Scott's talked about, that the left portrays is not, doesn't seem to be in line with all the things.
Wait, real quick. Let me grab some food and go to the bathroom. 1 sec. Oh boy.
Things we've just described that we feel intuitively as men, the things we think are important, like economic viability, being strong, you know.
I'll let Scott go first.
Well, on the right, they've conflated masculinity with coarseness and cruelty.
Violence.
The two kind of role models, you know, President Trump, who in my opinion demonstrates a lack of grace and a lack of empathy and a lack of kindness, and Elon Musk is currently being sued by 2 women for sole custody of their kid because he hasn't seen the kid. I mean, those are the role models we want for young men? And on the left, their vision of masculinity is act more like a woman. I don't think that's helpful either.
True.
I went to the Democratic National Convention, and there was a parade of special interest groups. Everyone was represented. Except for the group that needs the most representation right now, in my view, and that is young men. If you go to the DNC website, they list 16 special interest groups, and they say, who we serve. They call it out, who we serve. Asian Pacific Islanders, seniors, the disabled, immigrants, Black Americans. And I added it up. It's 74% of the US population. And when you say you're actively advocating for 74%, you're not advocating for the 74%, you're discriminating against the 26%. And who are the 26%? Young men.
Is this a consequence of DEI?
I think that's part of it. I think there's been so many groups that have been discriminated against. And the way I would just loosely describe the Democratic Party is we have the right ideas and then we just take it too far.
Yep. These guys are copying my shit. Fuck you. Fuck 'em. I'm the only person on the planet that's ever had that epiphany before.
Women have gotten a raw deal, so they need advantage. You know, gays have been persecuted. Non-whites have had. There were 12 Black people 60 years ago in Princeton, Harvard, and Yale combined. That was a problem. This year, more than 60% of Harvard's freshman class identify as non-white. So I think we...
Careful. What kind of non-white? That's why we made BIPOC, to get those pesky Asians out of there.
got to get out of identity politics, but the notion, it largely came from the left, this notion of toxic masculinity. There's no such thing, because there's violence, there's people who are criminals, there's people who are unkind. That means they're not masculine. Masculinity is being a protector, a provider, a procreator. And the Democratic Party seems to believe that leaning into anything around your advantage of being male in terms of your strength, your kindness, you're wanting to procreate, you're initiating sexual contact or sexual romantic interest, is somehow a threat and somehow toxic. I just think they've sent absolutely the wrong signal. And into that void has stepped basically thinly veiled misogyny that is just so ugly. You know, Trump flew right into it. The reason Trump won this election, in my view, is the groups that pivoted hardest from blue to red, 2020 to 2024, were Latinos who were sick of being categorized by their identity. But numbers 2 and 3 were people under the age of 30, especially males, who are not doing very well and feel like Donald Trump feels their pain, and women age 45 to 64. And my thesis is that's their mothers. Because if your son isn't doing well, you don't care about territorial sovereignty in Ukraine or transgender rights. You just want to change. My son isn't doing well.
Those are the people that whisper to me in the streets about these conversations. It's the 40 to...
Can we stop doing that? Listen, liberals need to do better, and I agree with all that. Okay, yes, we do. But can we please stop with this? These are the things that people say, that they whisper because nobody... But shut the fuck up, okay? This is the second time Trump's been president. Stop pretending like these people are the marginalized people who are too scared to let their opinions be known. Please stop with this fucking myth, okay? None of these people are shy. None of these people are too scared to share their fucking opinions. Stop with this. It is cringe.
55-year-old mother who has a son who doesn't feel like she can speak up, but says to me privately that she's worried about her kids. And actually, we had some mothers write in, all of which wanted to stay anonymous, saying this exact same thing. They've got an 18-year-old son, they're super concerned. They've got a 16-year-old son, the son looks lost. As the stats show from the report, they're not leaving home in the same way that women, their daughters leave home, but they don't know what to do about it. So for those parents that are listening now, we can't change society. What would you recommend a parent of a young boy does?
First thing is forgive yourself. there's this natural part of a separation where, and I think this is true of girls, but especially boys, where to make the separation easier, we don't get along with our parents in our senior year in high school. And that doesn't mean your son doesn't love you. That doesn't mean your
Yes, it
son's not
does.
going to figure it out.
They won't
But
ever
to
figure it
forgive
out.
yourself. But going back to more actionable things, try and get men involved in his life. And then, dumb stuff like my mom made sure I was in Boy Scouts. My mom, when I got cut from the high school basketball and football team, she enrolled me in city leagues so I could continue to play sports. But it was mostly, she always ensured that I had men in my life. And I think that was really, really important for me. But, I would just say that I feel like I need to coach men more. What I say to boys, one of the first things I say to boys, I had lunch with, I had lunch with someone who's a fairly famous news anchor and her son. And I asked the mom to they started going at it. And I asked the mom to excuse herself. And I said to the mom, I'm like, you realize this is the only person in your life ever that wants you to be more successful than you. You just got to cut this shit out. This woman is not your enemy. And I heard that, and I was a bit ashamed because I remember being such an asshole to my mother,
Wait, I misunderstood the story. Somebody else? Another guy said this? Hold on.
To excuse herself. And I said to the mom, I'm like, you realize this is the only person at it. And I asked the mom to excuse herself. And I said to the mom, I'm like, you realize this is the only person in your life. This woman is not your enemy. Because I remember and I heard that, and I was a bit ashamed because I remember.
Oh, he was just ashamed of himself. Okay, gotcha. I got it.
Being such an asshole to my mother, So I think I could say that to him because I could look him in the eyes and say, what the fuck are you doing? So I just think that male involvement for single mothers, and I think men are really willing to get involved.
I think there's something else happening there too that parents don't ever want to talk about, and I'm a firm believer in this. I don't think this has anything to do with men or women. I think that you need to, kids are very smart and they can learn things and they learn how to speak, and they, even without going to school, they learn, kids can absorb so much information. You owe your kids real explanations for the things that you say. And when people are like, don't talk back to your mom or don't talk back to your dad because it's rude. Fuck you. What do you mean because it's rude? You motherfuckers are rude sometimes. I feel like people just treat kids like retards, and you just tell them oh, just do this because it's what you're supposed to do. Having somebody explain something like that to you is a much better, maybe being a guy, especially if it's to a guy, maybe it helps to hear it from a guy for sure. I would grant that. But just having somebody explain bro, this is your mom. She loves you. And this woman's probably sacrificed a ton for you. And she's the only person that gives a fuck about you. Okay. So what the fuck, dude? That's a much better kind of talk down than just treat your parents with respect because they are your fucking parents. Okay, fuck you. Okay. Who cares? That they were my parents. They gave birth to me. But anybody can have kids,
Whether it's someone down the street, a coach, a sibling, your brother, whatever it is. But I do think, again, the research shows that the point of failure is when a boy loses a male role model. And also to forgive yourself. Being a single parent with a son, I think that's hard. I just think it's hard.
Logan, you've got some questions I can see written on a piece of paper.
I do have some questions for Scott, but I would love for you to answer them too.
I agree with your Sam, but there has to be a better way to do it than by guilt tripping the kid. Oh, I don't know. I don't view that as guilt tripping, I guess. Do you view that as guilt tripping? Maybe it feels guilt trippy. I view it more as hey, this is an important person in your life who is looking out for you, and they're trying to do you think is your parent just saying this because they hate you? I don't know. That's how I view it. But I guess maybe people view it differently.
So one of them is, what is something about being a man that you learned growing up that you have had to unlearn? And I'm wondering specifically in how you're raising your sons to avoid some of those things.
I think a great proxy for masculinity.
You know what? Actually, there's a difference between guilt tripping and there's a difference between making somebody feel guilty. And I think making somebody feel guilty is good, because if you've made somebody feel guilty, what you've done is you've managed to communicate to them that there's something you're doing that you should be ashamed about. There's something that you're doing that you should know better than this. You're a better person than this. In my mind, guilt tripping somebody is when you're trying to make somebody feel bad for some shit that they either shouldn't feel bad about or they're just not going to feel bad about because you haven't sold the argument to them, or because you're giving them a shitty argument. telling somebody like you should be nice to your mom because she's your mother and blah blah blah, and like that feels kind of like guilt trippy, I guess. But if you like give somebody a compelling reason for why they should be nice to their parents, and I think there are compelling reasons for why you should be good to your parents, and they end up feeling guilty as a result of that, I think that's okay. It's not bad to feel guilty, right? It's a part of the learning process.
Masculinity and manhood is, and Richard Reeves introduced me to this. I think it's so powerful, and that is surplus value. It's not about a religious ceremony. It's not about having sex. It's not about an age. It's about getting to the point of surplus value. You create more tax revenue than you absorb. I say to my boys, you're negative value. Look at all the resources going into you. Look at all the love. We love you so much more than you love us.
True.
Your teachers are spending all this time and energy, and you aren't giving anything back. At some point, that needs to pivot. So,
children are
creating more
ungrateful,
tax revenue,
leeches,
noticing people's life, registering more complaints from other people than you are complaining, protecting people, adding surplus value. So, these notions that, and I wasn't that guy. I wanted more from everyone else than I was giving. I was the guy when someone honked at me, I was the guy that sped up and honked back to restore the universe to its place. If a ticket counter agent at the airline counter was rude to me, I needed to get back in their face to restore harmony to the universe because I'm a fucking baller. And what you realize is being a man is occasionally taking a hit, right? It's having surplus value. It's noticing people's lives. It's listening to complaints. It's occasionally thinking, well, maybe this person who cut me off in traffic, I don't know what's going on with them. Maybe their kid has diabetes. Maybe they're going through a divorce. It's adding more value than you're taking. And until the age of like 40, I looked at every relationship. Am I getting more out of this than I'm giving? And if I'm not, I'm out. And what you realize is good business partnerships, you add as much or more value than your partners. Good relationships, you witness the person's life. You make them feel fucking awesome. If you leave this world a little bit in debt, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Or a little bit, if the world's in debt to you, that's the win. And I used to think as a young man, that meant I needed to exit the relationship. I'm not getting more money or services than I'm giving. I'm not getting more kindness than I'm not giving. I'm not getting more hot experiences with this romantic partner than they're giving me. I'm out. No, it's the other way around. Being a man is surplus value.
Yeah, I've never thought about that before, but it's so true that, like, as a man, you should aspire to be considered generous. And actually, the first time someone called me generous was like such an unbelievably wonderful compliment to me, because it means that people see you as someone that's giving things. But to answer your question, for me, it was just a willingness to express my emotions when I'm struggling. That's always been the difficult thing for me, especially because of everything I've said earlier about wanting to be strong, wanting to be a provider. There are going to be moments where, regardless of how well you play the game of life, you're going to struggle. And I did not have the tools. I still really don't have great tools for this, but to turn to someone and say, I'm really struggling with this, and not to feel emasculated. And I would say that because as a man...
Cliffhanger, hold on.